The world of Brave of Asterisk is a vivid RPG setting where heroes confront demons, and students, studying within the walls of a prestigious academy, forge strong bonds. Broken under the unbearable weight of overwork in a predatory corporation, a man wakes up already in this very world reborn. Now his name is Silva. He has traded his suit for armor and serves as a simple gatekeeper of the kingdom of Zaylansha. He stands vigilantly at his post until Modi arrives the senior guard to relieve him. Silva recalls his new life and realizes, even if he is not the chosen hero of this world, the fragment he found is more than enough. With deep relief, he watches the daily bustle of the kingdom and notices how pleasant it is to earn a living without the exhausting stress of his former existence. For him, this simple duty is a true paradise. The quiet observation is interrupted by the loud fabrications of a local merchant. The man brazenly imposes a sword on a young traveler, insists that it is the perfect weapon for her, and offers a suspicious discount. He recognizes the girl immediately. It is Charlotte Holland, a key character from the early stages of the game. Seeing her in the flesh, he is overwhelmed with fanboy triumph but keeps his joy inside. He listens as the merchant brazenly twists the story. Supposedly, the blade is a sacred sword, blessed by the spirit of the king. Silva knows perfectly well that this is a complete scam, yet he cannot help but notice how hopelessly trusting Charlotte is all too endearing. He looks at her and freezes. Her true beauty from the real world far surpasses any digital illustration he remembered. At that moment, he quietly offers a prayer of thanks for the chance to live in this world. Her sudden interruption comes from the voice of a young man. He calls her by name and orders her to wait. From the side, Silva watches as the newcomer approaches the pink-haired adventurer, breaking the merchant's spell that held her. This newcomer is none other than Alan, the central hero of the very game Silva once played. Seeing the hero in person, Silva realizes, if the story follows its usual course, the woman he just looked at may later become the hero's romantic interest. A strange feeling to see the main characters of this world interact right before his eyes. The realization throws him off balance. He blushes, trying to process how close these legendary figures are. Alan, unaware of the guard's inner turmoil, says that he is going to gather healing herbs and offers to escort the young woman to the castle gates, thus taking her away from the merchant's tent. As the duo sets off, the enterprising merchant instantly shifts his target and turns his gaze to Silva. He tries a new tactic, calls the brother guard and persuades him not to listen to others, offering a special discount on the supposedly legendary sword in a desperate attempt to make a sale. He leans in very close, his eyes gleam with greed, and he makes a bold, whispered statement. He insists that with this sword in hand, even a simple collar maker or an ordinary guard can rise to the level of a legendary hero, grasping the ambitions of a humiliated gatekeeper. After a brief silence for reflection, Silva lowers his gaze to the weapon and calmly declines the offer. The merchant's honeyed words and the promise of unearned glory do not move him. Immediately sees that the blade is a complete fake. With a gentle and sincere smile, he explains that he is completely satisfied with his current life, reminding the merchant that he is just a simple bouncer, and a standard sword is quite enough for his daily duties. He watches as the merchant snaps in frustration and growls angrily, muttering that he can find a better client somewhere else. The group moves on and Silva remains alone with his thoughts, accepting his role in this world, just an observer on the edge of a larger story. He is content with a quiet life. He watches as the hero walks away and fully realizes the bottomless chasm between them. While Alan is the doomed savior, the gatekeeper sees himself as no more than a background, just a face in the crowd of this world. This perspective was born from the life he once lived, even before he ended up here. A time when he was an exhausted worker, and the only solace was to immerse himself in the world of Brave of Asterisk. In those quiet moments between shifts, the game was everything to him, from beginning to end. He fondly remembers how Charlotte was always his favorite, although he admired every character and all the intricate events they lived through. In the true sequence of events, it is Alan and his companions who are doomed to put an end to the demonic threat and restore peace to the land. The young man's heart beats wildly at the thought of seeing the legendary story live with his own eyes. He decided, here in this living world, the best script must come to an end in his presence, so that he could survive and see it. He used all his deep knowledge of game mechanics in his new life. Recognizing the threat from demons, he chose the approach, efficiency above all, relentlessly grinding in the early stages to reach his maximum. He spent several years in voluntary solitude at the most successful training locations, pushing his physical limits to the edge. Yet even with such strength, he has no intention of taking on the role of a hero, as he considers himself a purist convinced that the original story must remain untouched. His conviction is so strong that he will never forgive anyone, not even himself, for someone changing the established path of the heroes. For him, The very joy of watching their journey from the sidelines is more than enough. This inner nightmare is sharply interrupted by the return of the elder Modi. He stops him on the spot and sees that the guard is clearly excited. Understanding nothing of the younger one's chatter about source material, the veteran only guesses what strange thoughts are now swirling in his subordinate's head. Silva approaches Modi and suggests having a drink as soon as the shift ends. Silva's enthusiasm is almost audible. He immediately agrees. In his mind, post-shift beer is already spinning, so Modi can't help but quietly laugh at his overly elevated mood. The quiet conversation suddenly breaks off. A frantic cry for help sounds above the gate. A demonic monster has broken through the perimeter. Its dark figure and gray hair spread terror among the guards, while Modi freezes in shocked incomprehension, looking at the sudden invasion. Feeling the exact nature of the threat, he quietly mutters the name of the event under his breath: the day of the wedge. When Modi notices his strange reaction and asks, he immediately brushes it off, insisting it was nothing. His realization begins with the methodology of this very event, the day of the loop, which is a key prelude to the main story of Brave of Asterisk. It happened exactly 1 month before the real narrative begins. A rare moment when demons, who usually act separately, carry out a coordinated and sudden attack on the kingdom, an event that heroes usually stop with minimal losses. He sharply returns to the present. He watches as Modi roars orders to the other guards to stay alert and not move from their positions. Modi emphasizes, their duty is to buy time for the heroes until they arrive and finish the job. His order is immediately tested. The demon lunges forward, its movements fast and predatory. Although it is only a level 1 creature and generally lacks sufficient power in the overall design, its presence already breaks standard defenses in the game. He watches the skirmish from the side and notes, these demons are not that formidable, but still far beyond the strength of an ordinary soldier. The difference in power is immediately visible. The guards barely hold back the beast. He continues weighing options while Modi engages in a desperate fight with the creature, realizing, defeating the monster would be easy for him, but it could disrupt the established scenario. He fears interference. What if it changes the plot he knows so well, and increasingly feels the pressure of circumstances as the guard's struggle continues. Eventually, he decides to play his role as a simple gatekeeper, to delay time and hope the heroes arrive before everything gets out of control. He rushes to Modi, his face frozen with anxiety as he asks how the old man feels. Modi brushes off the wound as a mere scratch, asks not to worry, but at that moment the distraction is enough for the demon to disappear into the trees. However, Modi roars at him for letting the creature escape, and he himself freezes, stunned by the monster's unnatural speed. While chaos spreads near the gates, Charlotte steals a moment of deceptive silence, hiding near a stream. She sits on the grassy bank, her long pink hair shining in the rays, and dips her bare feet into the cool, clear water, completely unaware of the danger already lurking nearby. After catching her breath from the break, she pulls on sturdy leather boots and quickly, habitually tightens the laces. The gathering task is complete. She nods to herself and heads back to regroup with Alan and the rest of the squad. Her departure is suddenly halted by a quiet rustle in the dense underbrush. Peering into the darkness of the forest, she calls out uncertainly whether someone or something is watching her from the other side of the gloom. Not far away, the young goalkeeper breaks into pursuit. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he tracks the demon's trail. He berates himself for hesitating and realizes he should have aimed for the legs to prevent this creature from retreating so quickly. When he breaks through the thicket, he suddenly notices a pink-haired adventuress standing alone in the clearing. He is overwhelmed with confusion. Why is she here in the forest at such a dangerous time? He watches her from the shadows, his heart pounding in his ribs like a hammer. He tries to calm himself. Supposedly, according to the established script of this world, no real danger threatens her today. But the anxiety gnawing inside does not let go. This horror happens in an instant. The demon bursts from the canopy, and its claws are mere inches from the frightened girl. Seeing everything around him crumble before his eyes, he throws off all restraint and charges forward with a desperate roar. The only thought, to snatch her from the monster's claws. He lunges forward sharply with an accuracy that belies his modest rank and performs a sword technique in the Zaylansha style. It forces the demon off rhythm. Charlotte lies on the ground, eyes wide open, not believing how her savior intervenes at the last moment. Gaining speed, he unleashes the devastating strike battle spinner. With a spinning top, the shockwave scatters the demon's defense and throws the creature back. Dust settles and the monster freezes on the forest floor, shattered by the unexpected power of the ordinary gatekeeper. He stands over the fallen enemy, and Charles is only beginning to recover from the rescue. Her hand trembles as she wipes away the sweat of fear. The young man falls silent for a moment. His face reveals nothing as he looks at the result of his intervention as if weighing the burden of the choice that just forced him to leave the familiar path. Raising her eyes to him, Charles noticeably softened his expression. and a faint blush spread across her cheeks as soon as she realized the depth of courage this stranger had shown, the one who risked everything to save her. Breaking the silence, he rushes towards her, the frantic anxiety washing away his fighting spirit. His former focus disappears. Suddenly one thing remains, to check that she is unharmed. He asks again and again if she is injured, and she quietly replies that everything is fine, although her condition is already visible, deeply embarrassed. Suddenly a wave of panic overwhelms him. He just realizes that he has done much more than an ordinary guard is allowed to do. He tries to wriggle out but cannot find any explanation. When she asks who he is, he can only stammer. His thoughts race, searching for a way to maintain his cover. He quickly tries to brush it off, insisting that he is just an ordinary gatekeeper, but she is not fooled by his modesty. Smiling and lightly laughing at his embarrassment, she explains, he is not talking to her about his profession, she is asking his name. He freezes for a moment, his cheeks flush with a deep crimson, while the young woman leans closer with a playful, expectant smile. Her request is simple, yet it carries weight, and as they move away together from the site of the battle, she repeats her demand, sincere curiosity burning in her eyes. Who are their rescuers? Swearing by his own words, he finally introduces himself, Silva. She bursts out with a bright, grateful exclamation. All this is a small exchange, like an everyday occurrence amid the aftermath of a demon attack, yet it becomes a turning point. From this day, the path of his life irrevocably begins to shift toward a new and unknown destiny. Silver stands beside Charles, and a growing sense of fear becomes increasingly visible on his face. Although he wanted to remain just a background character, his recent display of power attracted the attention of the very person he hoped to escape. Charles watches him with a careful, calculating gaze. A finger slowly rests on his lip as he contemplates the mysterious power he possesses. Realizing how terrible his mistake is, he begins to spiral in panic. He wanted to stay unnoticed, but by interacting directly with Charles, he inadvertently plunged into the very heart of the plot he sought to avoid. Near the castle gate, movement is bustling and everything around continues, indifferent to his internal catastrophe, while he bitterly reproaches himself for his lack of caution. He clutches his head, and thoughts race through his mind. The consequences of his actions could be catastrophic. Defeating a member of the demonic race in plain sight was never part of the plan, and he fears how this retreat will shake the established order of things. His turmoil is interrupted by the hoarse voice of Modi-senpai, who calls him and breaks this frantic stream of thoughts. The veteran guard delivers news that sends a new wave of shock through him. He has received a direct summons from the captain of the First Order of the Holy Knight. The order is clear and immediate, so he must appear at their headquarters without delay. Silva can hardly believe what he hears, his eyes widen from the sudden escalation. Seeing the young man's terror, he places a heavy hand on Silva's shoulder, offering a grim but somewhat comforting gesture. He jokes about gathering Silva's remains, a testament to the terrifying reputation of the one who summoned him. Silva can only sweat in silence. His anxiety escalates to a feverish peak as he mentally spins the horrors that lie ahead. The older man continues his warning, saying that although the captain is painfully meticulous, perhaps Silva will only face a stern reprimand. This offers little comfort, and Silva involuntarily slumps, clutching himself. The burden of his uncertain future weighs on his chest, while Modi-senpai barely manages to apologize for bringing such bad news. The monumental towers of the Order of the Holy Knight, the headquarters, rise above the sky, a stone fortress of power and authority. As he approaches the massive building, only one desperate desire remains in his mind. He knows exactly who awaits him inside, and is ready to give anything to avoid facing her, the one person capable of truly unraveling his carefully constructed mask and exposing the truth about his power. He approaches the office, and the captain of the First Order of the Holy Knight awaits him. Inside, she stands among shelves of books, attentively studying a document, immersed in focused silence. The report in her hands, and her eyes widen with sudden understanding. She turns away from the desk. The weight of that information clearly triggers a plan in her mind. Suddenly, her stern posture crumbles into wild, almost ecstatic joy. She sharply throws her arms apart, her face flashing a victorious smile as if the puzzle they had been waiting for had finally come together. When the door creaks, she opens her arms and greets him, shouting his name with such familiarity that it throws him off balance. He freezes as a child in the hallway, gazing at her striking figure, shining silver hair, eyes as deep as the sea, and embodies the figure she outlines with her commanding regalia. This is Eldie Snow White, the formidable captain of the First Holy Order of the Night. She is a central figure in the power structure of this world. Her sharp, all-knowing smile hints that she is far more observant than her overly cheerful greeting suggests. Confused by the sudden call, he cautiously asks what business she has with him. In response, she puffs her cheeks and pretends to be a child, as if offended that he even asked, calling him slow-witted because he did not grasp the full seriousness of the situation. While she continues to put on a show, cold sweat appears on his forehead. He knows. For some reason, she is one of the few who truly understands how great his hidden power is, and the fact that he was summoned here alone fills him with deep fear. Leaning forward with a piercing gaze that seems to see through his mask, she drops all pretenses. She directly says she knows. He is the one who defeated the demon, and this makes him tremble, for his carefully constructed cover is finally falling apart. She begins with the incident that happened recently, specifically how the mutilated remains of the demon were found. Silva tries to pretend he doesn't understand what she means, but his nervous sweat reveals his inner panic. Continuing the interrogation, she points out, the demon already had signs that it was defeated by one person. Besides the hero, only a few knight captains are capable of this, and none of them were on site. So who really dealt with the beast? She leans forward with a confident smile, pushing him to confess outright. Her eyes say, a man of such talent must serve the kingdom as a knight, but Silva remains silent. His gaze shifts aside as he struggles to maintain composure under her keen, merciless scrutiny. He understands, if he admits the truth, it will put an end to that quiet, unnoticed tenderness he cherishes so much. In despair, he looks for a way out and throws out the idea. Maybe the hero is to blame, because she did mention that she excluded them at the initial assessment. She snorts disdainfully in response to the proposal and explains that heroes are legally required to report their victories, yet the spider demon slayer remains officially unidentified. She leans in closer with a predatory smile, advising to cease resistance and join the Holy Knight Order, but he firmly refuses. This stubbornness clearly throws her off balance. Her eyes flash with indignation, and he stubbornly does not give up, which simply baffles her. She in turn retorts that despite her suspicions, she has no concrete evidence to support her words. He gradually gives in to her persistence. She sits down at the table and the question spins in her head, why is he so stubbornly refusing this position? She reminds him that the pay is significantly higher than that of an ordinary soldier, and besides, it comes with a bunch of royal privileges. He explains, joining the order means he will be forcibly dragged into missions alongside the hero. The role will force him to be a guardian both for the hero and for the nation, a life under constant surveillance and responsibility, from which he obviously wants to escape. He did not step back a single step, firmly repeating that he had no intention of becoming a knight. Inside, however, he was still worried. If he got too close to main characters like her, his peaceful life would only become more complicated, but he quickly dismissed this thought aloud as nothing as soon as she looked at him with curiosity. Seeing his stubbornness, she sighed heavily and released a deep frustration at his response. But her gaze suddenly sharpened. Within her awoke a firm decision. The usual pleas would no longer suffice. She could no longer afford to be selective in her methods. Resolutely, she moved toward him, and he was left bewildered by her abrupt change in behavior. Silver freezes in shocked disbelief, staring at the official document lying before him. His eyes widen because he immediately recognizes his own signature at the bottom. He fiercely denies it, insists he does not remember ever signing anything like this. Yet the ink on the page remains an undeniable, though impossible, fact. He breaks out in a cold sweat. Understanding dawns, and he sees that the captain's influence reaches further than he imagined. In the shadow of his thoughts, her silhouette emerges, and he realizes she is capable of coordinating even such a level of deception to force him into cooperation. She brushed off his concerns with a light, almost cheeky tone, stating that ignoring someone's will and forcing a person into order is a bad joke. As if in passing, she tossed him a rolled-up parchment scroll and was already thinking about the next stage of her plan. He grabs the sheet and unfolds it. His amazement only deepens as he examines the portrait and the small details of the stranger. He asks aloud who this person Ishi's eyebrows furrow because the face depicted on the recruitment form is completely unfamiliar to him. She recognizes the man as Brajo Bardley, a candidate for the upcoming entrance night exam. Her face hardens with cold determination as she declares her sole goal. She will never allow this man to join their ranks. She admits the name Bartley carries significant weight, fame, but he himself is nothing more than a worthless villain. Her gaze is sharp, full of contempt, hinting that his character is far from the standards expected of the Holy Knights. She explains the political delicacy of the situation. They cannot just let him down without reason, because his noble family will undoubtedly use their influence to overturn this decision. And that is why, as she admits, she needs him to intervene and take everything into his own hands personally. She concludes with an explanation. During the exam, he will be made an opponent in a demonstration fight, and he must so thoroughly crush the ambitious plans of the nobles that it becomes obvious to everyone his skill is worthless. He stands still, absorbing the weight of the task, and suddenly realizes he has been recruited to play the role of a saboteur. He reluctantly agrees to the terms, confirming, If he completes this task, she will finally stop her persistent attempts to recruit him into the Night Order. She responds with a confident, radiant smile confirming the agreement and fully placing her trust in his success. Outside the office, the sun hangs over the city's stone battlements, a silent witness to the secret deal made only for. Closing the door behind him after the meeting, the young gatekeeper lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh and feels the burden of the troublesome responsibility he has just taken on. His mind races wildly with the consequences. He recalls that the noble Brajo was never part of the story he knew. Any deviation in his actions regarding the Night Order could shake the entire scenario with unpredictable consequences. He freezes, pressing his hand to his chin and thinking deeply. When so many unknown variables come into play, the priority is to gather as much information as possible. All the while, as he holds to his intention to avoid further contacts with key figures of the world and not make any more mistakes, he is suddenly jerked by a persistent tapping on his shoulder. Turning around, he stops and finds himself face to face with Charlotte, who greets him with a cheerful smile. Despite the inner panic from this encounter, he quickly stammers that seeing her is actually a great pleasure. She looks him straight in the face, telling him about the day he saved her and then immediately disappears. She says that since then she has been relentlessly searching for him, becoming confused by her own persistence. He can only offer a weak, trembling excuse that the circumstances became too complicated. She moves closer, and a sharp realization flashes across her features as she points a finger at him. She demands to know where he even knows her name from, and panic immediately twitches within him. He instantly invents a story. Supposedly, he just happened to notice her name on the guest list while he was assigned to guard a ball in the upper world. She seems to accept this quite logical explanation, but inside he is crushed by the weight of his own deception. She brushes off his restrained politeness and insists. She doesn't want him to speak to her so politely and from such a distance. He finds nothing to object to, only silently nods, accepting her request for simpler, closer relations. Resolutely wants to express her gratitude. She does not intend to leave his previous help unrewarded. He tries to maintain a professional distance, says he just did what any soldier would do, but she is stubborn, offers to help him with duties or anything he might need. Only then does a genuine smile break across his face as soon as he realizes her help could be invaluable. He tells her that he is about to start a series of search inquiries and asks if she wants to join. The noisy streets of the entertainment district Zaylansha royal capital were bustling with life. This is the playing field of the Bardley family, one of the most influential noble houses of the kingdom. Making his way through the crowded square, Silver contemplates the family's reputation. Despite incredible wealth and influence, earned from the crown through huge donations, dark rumors do not subside. They whisper about human trafficking and illegal drug deals. Many people spread this in the name of their family, so information about such notorious scoundrels is surprisingly easy to find. Next to him, Charles steals a shy glance. Her cheeks softly blush as she watches him with a curious, expectant expression. He does not break away from work, cross-checking reports of recent observations. Judging by the collected data, the target should be right here nearby. Noticing her lingering gaze, he stops and asks if something is bothering her. She suddenly covers her face with her palms, and the blush deepens, becoming bright carmine. With a trembling, embarrassed voice, she asks where exactly he intends to take her in such a place. Embarrassed by her hint, he nervously weighs his own hands and stammers, insisting that she completely twisted his intentions. She lets out a light, teasing laugh and admits it was just a joke, and he can only hope they quickly find Brajo to put an end to the awkwardness. This man they are looking for, Brajo, is known. At night, he wastes himself in excesses. He is often seen carousing throughout the district, spending his family's wealth on drinking and debauchery. In the silence behind one of the quiet corners of the district, two friends look at rows of shops and taverns. Now the main thing is to find out behind which exact door Brajo disappeared that night. He walks beside his companion, and his stomach emits a loud, treacherous rumble that echoes in the silence of the street. Surely, the target is somewhere in this area, but he thinks they might have arrived a little earlier than the local establishments get into full swing. Blushing with shame before her, he awkwardly apologizes and suggests finding a place to eat, asking if she is hungry too. She immediately agrees, admitting that she had actually starved herself. Barely catching the appetizing smell in the air, she points toward the nearest shop and beams a joyful smile, and he quickly picks up on it too. Finding good food is the best thing to do. Soon she joyfully devours a huge, juicy burger, her eyes shining with delight as she takes a big bite. Watching her eat, he catches himself by surprise. For a person of her noble status, it really looks strange, such a passion for ordinary food like hamburgers, but somewhere deep in his memory it surfaces. It had always been this way, it was in her by nature. When the dish is almost finished, A wave of poignant sadness washes over Herthai's happens every time she finishes what she truly enjoys. He notes to himself that because of her short stature and delicate features, it is hard for her to handle such large portions, so this inevitable moment of sadness always catches up with her. She stares at those that remain, the connections of planes admits. Although she does not dislike them, the loss of the filling is still ugly. He silently watches and suddenly understands everything. This strange manner of finishing food is simply her habit. He is completely amazed. His face glows with an almost spiritual ecstasy as he watches his companion eat. The very magic of this moment lifts his soul to the heavens, and he is utterly bewildered by her presence. Having eaten every last crumb on his plate, he sighs contentedly and thanks the heavens for the food, noticing it is already late and pondering where to search next. Though he admits the hour is truly creeping into the deep night. Rising from behind the table, he insists he will leave alone and warns, "The entertainment district is no place for a woman at this hour." He sharply slaps his palm on the table, a burst of protective energy and thunders for everyone to move. Suddenly the tavern doors burst open with a bang, and Brajabardly rushes into the hall, followed step by several burly fools with a smugly condescending smile. He demands to know if there are free seats on the second floor. When the silhouette of the newcomer fills the hall, muted whispers spread among the other visitors. They recognize him as the quarrelsome man who recently caused a commotion over slow service and harassed a young woman. His reputation as an arrogant scoundrel precedes him. He explodes in a fit of rage as soon as he hears that there are no seats available. His face twists into a hideous mask of arrogance. He roars at the staff, unable to believe they did not prepare a place for a man of his stature, the great Brajo Bartley. The scene turns into complete chaos as he continues his brazen tirade, demanding his space be cleared immediately and snapping the question of whether they even know who his father is. While the poor workers can do nothing but bow and pour out feverish apologies under the pressure of his relentless harassment. From the viewpoint of the nearest table, the two of them watch the drama unfold, recognition and contempt in her eyes. She quietly asks if this is really their target, and he confirms with a grim nod, saying this man is indeed as confident a scoundrel as the rumors promise. He watches as the arrogant nobleman continues to deliver a spiteful speech, disdainfully brushes off the fallen servant, and declares that he wants to take his business elsewhere. When the nobleman is already turning to leave, his gaze catches the two sitting nearby and he stops with a curious, half-mysterious pause. He slowly moves toward their table. As if glued with his gaze, he quietly wonders if his eyes are deceiving him. With a winning gesture, he addresses her directly, calling her Charles Alland, while the young guard by the gate remains on high alert. She, tilting her head in confusion, politely asks if they have ever met before. In response, the man indignantly snaps, saying this is their very same meeting at a recent social event. Despite all his insistence, she still cannot remember him. The numbed mission makes the nobleman tremble, mixing shock and wounded pride. His face twists into a predatory smile as he leans in very close and whispers, if she really remembers nothing, he will make sure she never forgets him again. Brajo approaches Alan with an air of superiority. His face twists into a smug smile as he addresses the young man with condescending arrogance. Looking away, he leaned toward Charles, showering her with empty compliments about her famous beauty, and suggesting they leave the mundane tavern for a more decent establishment where he could properly entertain her. She meets his insidious attempts with a cold, sharp refusal, declaring a complete lack of interest in him, while Alan watches from behind, his irritation growing due to the man's brazen attempt to court his companion. Despite the first cold rebuff, the nobleman does not retreat and continues his advance. He offers the most exquisite delicacies and spirits, and when she reminds him that it is still too early for her to drink, he rushes in panic to quality fruit juice. His gaze narrows as he looks intently at her. True irritation flashes across his face, his features contort from her stubborn defiance and lack of gratitude for his status. Turning his gaze to the young man, he asks if he is her guard. Alan steps forward and firmly declares that he is the protector of Charles Allen and that these boundaries will help keep these pests at a distance. A faint blush touches her cheeks as she hesitates for a moment, then confirms to the stubborn nobleman that the man beside her is indeed her guard. The opening phrase triggers a wave of mocking laughter from the nobleman and his companion. They ridicule the idea that someone so ordinary-looking would serve a noble house. Alan silently boils with rage, planning a cruel retaliation in response to the insult. He stands silently while Brajo continues the verbal attack, interrogating, pressing on Charles's family. They are so desperately short of people that they hired someone like him. The nobleman's offer to lend his own guard is a mocking insult, and the young man feels guilt breaking through. Charles is humiliated only because of his simple appearance. Rajo majestically gestures toward the three men behind him and boasts that they are elite former knights, handpicked by the Barley family. He laughs, declaring that such formidable warriors are the only ones truly worthy to serve as his personal protection. Seeing the futility of the argument, Charles quietly signals Sylvie. It's time to leave. The young guard beside her is still tense. The thought spins in his head that even former holy knights can be bought if you have enough coins, and this leaves a bitterness in his mouth. Their attempt to break free is interrupted by an even more brazen laugh from Brijo. She mocks that pitiful-looking guard and sarcastically hopes they make it to her estate in one piece. But Charles stops as if rooted to the spot, turns around, and tells her that she is deeply mistaken about. With a confident, almost playful smile, she points back to her companion and declares, "The so-called elite guards of Brijo are not even worthy to stand in the shadow." When they finally get out of the tavern, she quietly apologizes, admitting that she lost her composure because of the insults directed at him. He is stunned for a moment, and it strikes him that she gets so worked up for his sake. But their conversation is cut off by a voice coming from behind. One of the bulky guards steps forward, his face frozen in a challenge as he says he wants to verify the truth of the girl's brazen words. The young man looks back and a calculated curiosity appears in his gaze. He sees this as a perfect chance to find out if Brijo is really an important figure in this story and to gather more information. Accepting the challenge, he tells the man that he will play by his rules, and this causes a self-satisfied smile on the huge warrior, who is clearly eager to fight. He stands over the fallen guard, cracking his knuckles with a terrifyingly calm look. The former proud warrior now trembles with horror, begging for mercy and swearing to tell everything he knows about Brajo's illegal affairs. While the interrogation continues, the guard confesses to a whole list of crimes including drug trafficking and brutal extortion. The scale of Brajo's corruption is striking. The young swordsman noticeably tremble, realizing the true depth of the villainy he has revealed. Silver stands over the fallen guard and thoughtfully weighs the seriousness of what has happened. The man on the ground exposes Brajo's dirty plan to join the Knight Order and, finding the captain's weak spots, manipulate the organization. He looks into the distance, and his gaze becomes increasingly harsh as he weighs the consequences. If the Knight Order turns into a private tool for the nobility, the lives of ordinary people will be at risk, and the entire nation will rot. He understands, at any cost, this deviation from the intended path must be prevented. He lowers his gaze to the fallen guard and sternly warns, their defeat must remain a secret. The guard, swallowing his shame, instantly agrees and promises his master to report a completely devastating victory. The swordsman's show of strength leaves Charles in stunned paralysis. She looks at him and cannot believe her eyes. She presses him with questions, trying to understand how he became so formidable if even a demon fell from the strike of his blade without any effort. Her conclusion is simple. He is by no means an ordinary soldier. In response to her questions, he gives a modest, slightly embarrassed smile. He explains that his strength comes from years spent alone in the mountains, and this story leaves her confused. He continues the explanation, telling about the harsh environment full of monsters, where every day was a continuous struggle for survival, and says that it was because of this that he gained his current abilities. And she wonders if such a path could make her stronger too, but he silently decides. She does not need to go through this bloody training. He reassures her with a warm smile, insisting that she will find her own path to strength without such extreme measures. He says this with such firmness that he is ready to stake his own life on it. And she, moved by his sincerity, admits she completely trusts his judgment. They begin to leave the site of the clash. The tension finally slowly releases. When her stomach rumbles, she remembers her hunger, then he advises finding another place to eat and offers to pay for the food. He walked the quiet streets under the moonlight, with the silhouette of the clock tower looming behind him. His mind was only on the service. As a devoted follower, participation in the cause was a natural duty for him, and he accepted it without any hesitation. When the day of the entrance exam to the 127th Knight Order finally came, the young man stood among those who hoped, with grim determination. He knew he must not let the order become a private tool for the corrupt, no matter the cost. When he was preparing for the first stage, behind the scenes of the lottery, a series of fake fights had already set the schedule. A familiar, mocking voice cut through the air. It was Brajo. He looked truly shocked, saying that his guards reported the gatekeeper was beaten so badly that he shouldn't be going, let alone participating in the competition. The swordsman calmly explained. He went into the church to buy high-quality medicine for recovery. It cost him very dearly, almost no money left, but his strength fully returned. This explanatory speech only provoked loud, contemptuous laughter from the nobleman, who immediately began boasting about his perfect armor, wildly waving his hand at his shiny breastplate, claiming it was forged from rare or calcum, and that its quality was something no commoner could ever imagine. He kept laughing, leaning closer to mock the sheer failure of their alliance. For him, it was a ridiculous game of fate. The very man he hated was now his official opponent at the center of the training ground. Turning his gaze to the nearest examiner, the arrogant young man casually asked what punishment awaited for the accidental killing of an opponent during a duel. When told it meant immediate disqualification, he just clicked his tongue and said to the gatekeeper, "Let him consider himself lucky that such a rule exists to protect his life." When the signal to start was finally given, the nobility once again twisted into a mask of furious aggression rushed forward, shouted a battle cry, eyes wide open, intent on wiping out the opponent with a single stunning blow. He lunges forward with a growl, but the strike misses. Instead, his blade clangs against the ground, he stumbles, and his face twists in pain and complete disbelief as it dawns on him. The attack has failed. He struggles to regain his dignity. He brazenly shouts, supposedly the hand just slipped and the failure was a coincidence. He says that in the next exchange he will give the goalkeeper a handicap, but Silva, unmoved by his arrogance, calmly invites him to try again just like at the beginning. He notices the trembling in the opponent's hand and says that he is probably so numb that he cannot properly hold the sword. The nobleman has not yet had time to process the insult when Silva has already dashed forward with blinding speed. The path of movement remains a blurred imprint, and in an instant the distance between them disappears, leaving the second man gasping for air in confusion. Hand says that he is probably so numb that he cannot slowly settles in his chest. The guard still hasn't even begun to take this duel when Silva has already dashed forward with blinding speed. The path of movement remains a blurred imprint, and in an instant the ignored disappears, leaving the second man gasping for air in confusion. Feeling the futility of this circus, Silva decides to put an end to everything quickly in due time. He changes his stance, his gaze sharpens and he is ready to finish the fight. He whispers the words of the spell, initiating the amplification of magical power. Nearby, the aura trembles faintly as he directs inner energy, compressing will into a single point of might. This technique transforms the body's internal spiritual energy into physical strength, hardening the flesh until it becomes as resilient as tempered steel. When this energy is directed into a blade, it grants the master the power to cut through solid iron as if it were mere parchment. He contemplates the fundamental truth of their existence. The vast majority of humanity lives life completely blind to the magical force that permeates the world to rise to the rank of hero. But the ability to control this energy at will is a strict necessity. It is this mastery that is the only way to overcome the chasm against demons whose physical forms possess natural power and endurance far surpassing any ordinary human. Alan examines the Calcum aura armor. His voice is calm, but his presence increasingly weighs heavily on the space and suddenly a suffocating pressure flares in the air, taking the breath away. He points to simple logic. Without a humiliating blow, victory cannot be won. The eyes narrow, cold anger grips the opponent to trembling. Brajo, a nobleman, panics at this shift and accuses him of being merely a lowly mercenary hired by Charles. These words make the swordsman's face darken dangerously. He continues to retreat backward, trembling as he realizes the man before him has fundamentally changed, becoming a horror, alien and unrecognizable. He makes a desperate attempt at bribery, offers more gold than Charles could ever, just for the warrior to switch to his side and serve him instead. The plea of a desperate man falls on deaf ears as the warrior moves forward, a low, deadly warning voice. Any movement will be met with death unless he is allowed life for noble values. The swordsman falters as soon as the noble dares to insult Charlagan. His fury boils over, and he roars with pure rage, ordering the man never to utter her name. She raises his blade in a dazzling flash, performing the white waterfall technique of the Zelencia style with colossal force to finish the clash. He freezes in stance, like a moment after a blow, and Brajo is paralyzed by shock from its consequences. The nobleman freezes and looks up. His face pales because he realizes all that incredible power just unleashed on him. Through the devastating power, the armor made of Brajoyski Orichel come his pride lies in ruins, shattered like glass. He stammers in shock, unable to comprehend how his supposedly invincible defense could break so easily. In a moment, the fallen nobleman officially surrenders, his weapon's spirit broken, and he trembles, curled up on the ground. The swordsman lets out a weary sigh. Finally, it is all over, and he can at last report to Captain Elda about the successful outcome. Meanwhile, Proctor's voice echoes through the arena, officially announces the winner of the clash. From the stands, Elda and Charlotte watch everything. All eyes are fixed on the arena as Silva is declared the winner. When the crowd around begins to buzz with whispers and the air thickens with scrutinizing glances, he is suddenly seized by a pang of conscience. He realizes with surprise that showing strength turned out to be much louder and more noticeable than he had expected. Finally, he looks ahead, calm concern in his eyes. The realization fully dawns. It seems he has attracted too much unwanted attention. The same behind the reliable walls of the capital. Captain Elda sits at her huge wooden table, on her face genuine gratitude. She begins by thanking the young traveler, emphasizing, it was precisely thanks to his intervention that they managed to successfully thwart Brajo's attempt to join the Holy Knight Order. She continues the speech. Her voice carries both gratitude and stern determination. Thanking once again, she makes it clear that Brajo's past guilt cannot be ignored. She is determined to gather enough evidence so that in the end he will still be thrown into the dungeon where he belongs. The young man remains in place, his face frozen in a stern expression as he reminds her of the agreement they made. He demands that she keep her promise, his thoughts briefly seized by the memory of how his comrade was insulted by an arrogant nobleman, fueling his desire to finally set things right. Having listened to his request, she agrees. His role in exposing Brajo's worthlessness was decisive. She nods reservedly and gives a formal promise no longer to pursue him for recruitment into the Knights, promising that her persistent investigations will finally cease. He beams with relief, his shoulders relax as he suddenly rejoices at the thought of returning to a quiet, unremarkable daily life. Seeing his joy, she cannot help but notice how truly indifferent he is to the prestige of knight poverty. Her face slips into a slight, barely noticeable note of disappointment. Suddenly she leans forward, her gaze becomes eerily intense, and she asks if he is 100% absolutely sure about his decision. When he confirms his choice with a confused but firm, yes, a noticeable trembling crack of despair appears on her impeccably composed face. The grip on the reins in the captain's hat breaks completely. She slams her fists on the table with a bang and bursts into a loud, childish tantrum. She screams that she will not let him go and demands that he become a knight directly under her personal command. The young man recoils in shock at her sudden and final betrayal of their agreement. She bursts into another emotional outburst, hiding her face in her palms and whining about her desires. Alan, thrown off by the sharp change in the captain's professional manner, awkwardly hands her a handkerchief. He cannot hold back the thought. This openly pitiful trait of hers, which he knows from the events of this world, appeared at a very inopportune moment. Quietly sobbing and wiping her eyes, she accepts the fabric with a barely audible word of thanks, promising to wash and return it as soon as she recovers. After a chaotic clash, he returns to his post by the city gates, where Silva greets him with enthusiastic praise. His comrade encourages him to keep up the brilliant work, but the burden of the day's events leaves him more exhausted than satisfied. When he gets caught up in the routine again, his attention is caught by the quiet conversation of two knights passing by. They speak softly and urgently about having seen a demon again, and with anxiety note, this is already the third such case in 1 month. The news presses on him as he walks through the city. Demons appear more and more often, and this indicates a shift in the world's balance. He understands. The central events of the story he remembers are not far off, and these visions are probably the first waves of the coming storm. He stopped by the stone basin to splash cold water on his face. He tries to dispel the growing tension and gather his thoughts more clearly. He is gnawed by the question of the timing of these events, whether he accidentally disrupted the path to the future he awaits with his own actions. He finds solace in the thought of the true hero of the world and believes that as long as the protagonist stays on his path, a happy ending is still possible. Hope is fragile, but he clings to it as the shadows of the future confrontation begin to grow. He shudders as a sudden, fierce blow shatters the river into pieces, and a cloud of dust rises at the point of impact. Through the haze emerges a figure, rare eyes gleam with a sly intent, and a chill runs down his spine because he understands. His worst fears are truly beginning to come true. He shudders as a sudden, fierce blow shatters the river into pieces, and a cloud of dust rises at the point of impact. Through the haze emerges a figure, rare eyes gleam with a sly intent, and a chill runs down his spine because he understands. His worst fears are truly beginning to come true. The newcomer stands upright, towering so that her presence presses and takes one's breath away, and announces she has finally found him. She addresses him Silva, and her smile widens, predatory and refined. This is Kaguya, a special major heroine, a woman whose fame precedes her even in this unexpected encounter. She instantly closes the distance effortlessly. Her voice shifts to a tender, husky whisper, and she calls him darling, confessing that she has been endlessly searching for him. Frightened, he tries to move away. His mind races to maintain the distance. He desperately needs to escape the main events of this world, but her gaze is fixed on him, unwavering and intense. Before he can escape, she suddenly lunges forward and wraps him in suffocating embrace, her hands clasp around his neck. She mockingly asks where he intends to go, leaving his beloved wife behind. Panic finally overwhelms him, and he shouts for someone to save him from this unwelcome, exhausting tenderness. This woman is not just an ordinary pursuer. She is one of the legendary heroines destined to overcome the world's challenges, and the only one among them who holds the title of special class. Known as humanity's last trump card, she is a master of gravity magic. Once laughing, she destroyed a high-level demon and became an unpredictable force of nature that no ordinary man can catch. Alan stands in the silence of the forest's true strength lies in a secret known only to the chosen, including the mighty Captain Elda. Nearby, Kaguya, a special great hero, looks at him with tension bordering on obsession. She leans closer. Her face flashes with predatory joy as she declares that their meeting is nothing but fate. To her, he is the only one worthy of being her destined partner, and she says this with unwavering confidence. Under her watchful gaze, he awkwardly flinches, and a drop of sweat crawls down his temple as he tries to divert her attention. He says that due to the recent surge in reports about demons, a hero of her rank probably has to prioritize official duties over such personal whims. She only slightly tilts her head, dismissing the thought of duty playfully with an expression far too indifferent. For her, the moment when she is beside him is many times more important than the everyday responsibility of a hero. He is infinitely more interesting than any monster hot. Molodic just keeps staring backsilent, not believing his eyes. His face shows both exhaustion and genuine concern. He begins to doubt the state the world has come to if one of its most powerful defenders so easily succumbs to her own whims. Ignoring his doubts, she easily spins in the dance, laughs carefree, and boldly declares that she is his wife as if it were a long-established fact. He shouts after her from behind, his voice tense, trying to explain that no such union ever existed. She doesn't stow for laughter jingles as she thoughtfully considers when to schedule their wedding ceremony. Catching that his words are falling on deaf ears, he sighs in defeat. But suddenly she sharply turns around and suggests visiting a cozy cafe she recently opened. Before he can utter another protest, she grabs his hand and starts pulling him toward the city. He stumbles after her. His weak objections are completely blown away by the wind while the special great hero drags him to their forced afternoon tea. While she continues her relentless hunt for Alan somewhere else, Elda Snow White sits at her desk in the Holy Knight Order headquarters, her face full of frustration, repeatedly flipping through reports of the latest appearances of the demonic race, lamenting that the Order once again failed to capture them. She approaches the window and looks at the city with a heavy heart. Against such overwhelming circumstances, her thoughts once again drift to Sylvand. She catches herself wishing he were near, to give his unique gaze and strength. Walking through the quiet corridors, she is still lost in thought the burden of her order and the recent failures of the knights weigh on her shoulders. A faint smile slides across her face as she contemplates the mysterious nature of the man she knows as Silva. Despite the danger, she understands. She has already grown used to him finding a way out even of the most impossible situations, a hope she clings to in these dark times. Her consciousness flashes back to the heat of battle. The air was thick with the smell of blood and the desperate cries of her people. When the message came that the hero was defeated, she did not hesitate for a moment. She ordered a full retreat while she stood her ground alone against the demonic horse charging forward. She knew, while another hero was being summoned, the containment of the threat here and now fell on her. Despite the hellish pain from her wounds, she calculated the time until Kaguya's arrival and decided to cut down as many monsters as possible to protect the innocent. Although she felt confident that she could destroy level 1 demons even in an exhausted state, the appearance of a level 2 threat pushed her beyond the limits of possibility. Every movement was a struggle. Her armor thudded with blows and her breath came out in ragged gasps as she fought not to fall. With one last stubborn surge of energy, she grips her weapon tighter, and an unbreakable determination burns in her eyes. She will not let her life fade without a fight, vowing to turn every moment into the defense of her kingdom. She lunges forward with a desperate scream. The blade traces a dazzling arc in the air and she orders the beast to fall. But the demon is too fast. With predatory grace, it shifts its weight and lets the steel pass by, so it only whistles through the air near its chest. A cold, mocking smile spreads across its face as it casts a glance into the distance and notices other knights. Another moment and it leaps into the air. A dark, blurred shadow flies straight toward her unsuspecting allies. Her heart tightens as she realizes the plan, and a curse escapes her lips as she watches it fall on her comrades. The mighty monster demon roars and charges forward, its massive fist flying ahead, red eyes blaze with murderous intent. Elda screams a defiant refusal, blade at the ready, while the rest of the knights huddle behind, trembling with fear. In the midst of chaos, he stands completely still, his gaze fixed on the demonic threat and unflinching. Unlike the knights in shining silver armor, he is dressed only in simple leather and dull steel armor, but his presence is far more commanding. He realizes the real fight has just begun. His face hardens, a new composure appears in it. Seeing him in the very heart of the fire, she suddenly reaches forward, her voice trembling as she pleads with him to flee to save his life. Ignoring her pleas, the young man bursts into action, muttering something cryptic about it, and without wasting a second as he swings, the blade flies in an arc, cutting through everything around. The strike fills the air with power pure, wild, and contrary to his modest appearance. She stands frozen in silence, and the smooth flow of his movements suddenly evokes in her memory a legendary figure she once knew. In her eyes, his fencing is a work of art, the most captivating display of skill she has ever seen. Since that fateful meeting, she does not retreat a step, endlessly trying to lure him to the Night Order. Although he repeatedly brushes off her proposals and downplays his own abilities, she knows the truth, the colossal power he carefully conceals. He freezes in confusion as she approaches closer. Her onslaught almost knocks him off his feet. In her heart, it is already firmly established. His very existence is a gift meant to protect peace in their world. By morning, the incident had already spread, and the subordinate, completely stunned, shouts, "The captain herself is managing the consequences." She stands straight, and her thoughts are still held by that mysterious swordsman who turned everything upside down. She stands amid the icy ruins after the attack while the knight gives a briefing on the dire situation. 2 victims were found, and the lack of evidence suggests that an extremely cunning demon was behind it all. The knight cautiously suggests, maybe such a threat required calling a hero. The officer continues the story. He says the victims are only women, and their bodies have bite marks and signs of blood loss. He assesses the threat as at least a level 3 demonand. This makes her lower her gaze to the fallen, with a pained expression on her face. She barely whispers about the incredible cruelty of what happened. The officer continues the story. He says the victims are only women, and their bodies have bite marks and signs of blood loss. He assesses the threat as at least a level 3 demonand. This makes her lower her gaze to the fallen, with a pained expression on her face. She barely whispers about the incredible cruelty of what happened. On cold ground, 2 women lie motionless, life extinguished in demonstrative, senseless cruelty. Seeing the massacre, she instantly springs into action, gives a series of sharp commands to raise all forces to the highest alert and expand the search area. Then she orders to pass the word to other night orders and also directly demands that the gate warden Silva immediately arrive at headquarters. They walked through the stone corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Kaguya leaned toward Alan, a mischievous spark flashing in her eyes. She expressed delight at their first joint mission and, playfully calling him darling, moved closer. Alan flinched, his face twisted with irritation and shame, and he sharply snapped for her to stop using that ridiculous pet name. He exhaled silently, feeling the weight of the last 24 hours pressing down on him. Since yesterday, she had become an unbearable shadow, following his every move with stubborn, relentless persistence. And now, as if that were not enough, he had been drawn into a formal investigation, an event that was exhausting and deeply troubling at the same time. Under the cold glow of the full moon, she stood, a figure of dark elegance, her silhouette sharply outlined against the night sky. And he stayed in the background, cautious, alert, and relentlessly watching. Her presence was felt like a predatory power, confidently rooted in the silence of the evening. Years earlier, within the very walls of the headquarters, everything was much more mundane and clinical. He stood before Captain Elda, and each time the word vampire was uttered for the first time, it became increasingly clear how serious the situation was. The mere mention of this creature struck the room with coldness, pulling their conversation into a much darker realm. She recounted the gruesome details of the case, speaking evenly, though the report itself was horrifying. They found 2 victims, their bodies completely drained of blood, leaving only pale remains. The most damning evidence was clear bite marks on their necks, confirming the predatory nature of the attacker they are now hunting. Turning back to the present, he again turned his attention to the woman beside him and did not understand why she was involved in this grim matter at all. She only gave a cryptic, contemptuous smile, as if neither her whereabouts nor actions should concern him. Nearby, Elda watched their quarrel, frowning more and more from the lack of professional decency. She suddenly closed the distance and gripped him tightly with her hands in an unbearably familiar gesture. He immediately tried to shake her off, raising his voice and ordering her to step away from him, but she did not move an inch, holding on and only smirking playfully as if their physical closeness was the most ordinary thing in the world. The captain finally reached her limit. She sharply struck down with her hand, demanding the conversation be taken seriously. She was met only with a mocking remark from Kagayashi, teased the knight for her too wooden, too formal manner. The tension between the disciplined soldier and the chaotic stray hung in the air, so the investigation stalled. She lets out a tired sigh, trying to pull herself together after the recent setback. She exhales sharply and decides it's time to get back to work. Her gaze hardens as she returns to the investigation. The captain begins to break down the threat. He says the culprit is probably a demon that evolved from a bloodbath. This creature has a terrifying ability to mimic human behavior it is almost impossible to track. Its power is estimated to be at least level 3. Casting a glance at the young gatekeeper, she notes, even a dozen elite knights cannot handle such a high-level demon. And she concludes this is precisely why his unique involvement is needed. The entire burden of this task falls on his shoulders. He hesitated, gesturing to himself, while explaining that he was just a gatekeeper for small tasks, not a high-stakes monster hunter. She immediately dismissed his modesty. The shortage of people was too critical to ignore, and he had to join the Sersheven if he had to act alone. The prospect of working alone throws him off track. He looks at her, mixing embarrassment with growing suspicion. Before agreeing, he demands explanations, frowning as he tries to discern the true motives behind such a very specific request. She bursts out laughing loudly and admits with unexpected straightforwardness. His success will inevitably enhance her reputation and significantly ease officially recruiting him into the Knight Order. She boldly denies it as some cunning scheme to lure him into service, but her transparent ambition speaks for itself. He stands frozen in stunned silence, watching her continue to flaunt herself, and he understands. She shamelessly speaks her true intentions. Now it is clear to him that she is not even trying to hide it is using this crisis for her own political gain. Realizing that he cannot refuse a direct order for a formal investigation, he reluctantly agrees to the task. But as soon as he begins, everything takes a completely different turn. Special grade hero intervenes in the conversation and declares that he will also participate if he is involved, leaving him completely bewildered by her sudden attention. She remains defiant and insists that her only desire is to be close to Silva, no matter how much it disrupts the official performance. Elda can only grit her teeth and silently rage. The hero's stubbornness ruins her plans because of such a capricious demand. Understanding the futility of further arguments, the captain surrenders, acknowledges that they now need all possible help. He strictly orders this pair to immediately appear at the investigation meeting to thoroughly comprehend the full seriousness of the situation and all the details of the demon they are hunting. When they apologize and leave the office, the young doorman noticeably trembles. Drops of sweat appear on his forehead from that fierce conversation. Their appearance in the meeting hall immediately draws the attention of the gathered knights. They begin whispering among themselves in hushed, confused, and bewildered voices, asking who this mysterious woman is and why a legendary hero of a special class can be seen alongside an ordinary private. Is this really the captain's order? In the room, the air buzzes a continuous whisper of gossip, until the incredible couple takes their seats before the assembly. She approaches the table and asks if there is a free seat. The young goalkeeper quickly yields it, and his face lights up with a polite, sincerely joyful smile as she thanks him and settles in. With a cheerful little smile, she throws how strong they look among everyone. And he cannot help but think that it is she who attracts the glances, yet he still keeps this thought to himself. When the group settles into their seats, the elder of the assembly at the head of the table calls everyone to order. He announces, now that everyone is present, the formal investigation of the recent vampire incidents will begin right now. The knight begins to reveal grim facts. The bodies of 2 women in their 20s were found in the southern district of the royal capital. The air in the room turns to stone as the details of the victims are announced. Listening to the knight curse the cowardice of the demonic lineage, the young man catches himself in a troubling thought. He recalls, this very event was not mentioned in any chronicles he knows, so it turns out the path went differently than it should have. He thinks that despite this glitch, the main heroes of the current era will still step forward and save the situation before it gets out of control. He tries to convince himself that eventually the situation will stabilize on its own. Hearing the doubt struggling within him, the woman beside him casts a glance his way, intelligent and slightly smiling. He catches her gaze, forces a nervous, shy smile, and cannot hide his unease. The conversation turns into immediate action. The order is to expand the search perimeter and strengthen night patrols. The young man tenses and focuses as soon as he hears the latest task. He and his partner are to take control of the eastern gates. He returns to his companion ready to start the investigation but sees her sleeping peacefully. He cannot believe that she is still lying unconscious, no matter how serious their mission is and how urgently everything is happening. When he exhales a sigh due to her absence of haste, a feeling of something suddenly appears nearby and his attention is caught. He turns his head, sensing that someone is approaching from the darkness of the corridor. Above him suddenly looms a gigantic knight, a stern, scarred face. He demands to know which unit he belongs to. The sheer harshness of his gaze and his monumental figure will make any ordinary soldier falter and hesitate. He does not wait for a full explanation. Instead, he explodes with anger at Captain Eld's decision to pair the special great hero with a worthless goalkeeper. He does not understand what the captain means by allowing such an uneven pair. He continues his tirade, insisting that the heroes should work with the Second Holy Knight Order. Looking at him, the young soldier realizes, it's not about efficiency or safety, it's a blatant attempt to snatch the glory of the investigation from LD. Despite the intimidation, he points out, a knight has no right to cancel existing orders. But the disobedience twists the older man's face into a mask of pure, unadulterated anger. His eyes widen in disbelief at the soldier's insolence. He completely rejects any logic and declares that the current vampire incident is far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary soldier. After that, he shouts a direct order. The young man must immediately withdraw from the investigation because his presence is a burden. When he tries to prove that he is acting under the direct order of the captain of the First Order, the knight suddenly snaps. He roughly grabs the young man and shouts that the Second Order does not take instructions from the First, and his aggression quickly reaches a dangerous boiling point. He roars madly with overconfident fury, firmly grabs Silva by the collar, and declares that the Second Holy Knight Order will not yield to the First. He sees the guards only as an obstacle to be removed in order to complete their mission. Behind him, his subordinates shudder with sudden horror. Their eyes wide open, they try with all their might to warn their leader about something inevitably approaching from behind. They sense a change in the atmosphere. The examiner, blinded by his own pride, does not notice it. Inside, his scream cuts through an eerily calm voice. It notices how noisy he is. The knight freezes in confusion. Barely behind, a predatory smile of a particularly great hero emerges, and it radiates cold, deadly malice. In response to the threat to her companion Kaguya-zura, she flares with dark, predatory energy and demands that he say what he thinks, doing this to her beloved. Silva, caught between rising tension, desperately tries to quell the conflict before it escalates into violence. He can only freeze. Silent lithe air seems to vibrate under the incredible weight of her power, which only grows. The scale of her magical pressure is something the young prisoner by the gates has never seen before. Throwing a simple, cold command release him, she unleashes a devastating force, and the armored knight flies into the air, flying backward. The examiner's confidence instantly shatters. He is thrown aside like a toy by the hero's undeniable power. She stood over the fallen examiner with a self-satisfied smile, and commented on the audacity of the one who dared to raise a hand against her husband. Noticing the confused expression of the young gate guard, she playfully stuck out her tongue and lightly apologized, admitting that as a special great hero, she often finds it hard to control her immense strength. Late that night, as they walked through quiet streets, he clutched his chest, was still shaking after the sudden display of magic. He warned her that such surprises were bad for his heart, but she only thought the evening patrol was quite romantic. She continued her justificatory speech as they walked, explaining that since the man himself started the fight, it was perfectly natural for a devoted wife to intervene and protect her husband. Leaning forward with a radiant, hopeful smile, she almost begged for at least a little praise for her defensive actions, and he could only grumble that her help was appreciated, but her methods were undoubtedly too harsh. Despite his silence, she insisted that her feelings were real. She confessed that she adored his meddlesome nature and even how easy it was to tease him. Despite his silence, she insisted that her feelings were real. She confessed that she adored his meddlesome nature and even how easy it was to tease him. Then her face changed to sincere, focused admiration as she added this. Above all, she was drawn to that mighty force he held in the shadows away from the whole world. She leans closer, and her quiet voice sounds like a soft challenge as she says she wants to see his true potential someday. He brushes off the thought with a tired cicertain that such a chance will never come in his lifetime. Because of his skepticism, she lets out a light, conscious laugh as if great power always carries a heavy burden of responsibility. He quietly repeats this word to himself, and the weight of the thought settles on him as they walk on. In a moment, she freezes and gestures towards the sky, her figure bathed in the ghostly glow of the full moon. She notices how beautiful it is, and her appearance against the night seems almost otherworldly. The heavenly glow reflects in his eyes, capturing the silent, profound moment they share between themselves. The silence stretches and stretches, and she returns to him again. Her gaze becomes unusually sad. She asks a strange question. Will he believe her if she says she was born right from the moon? This question arises from a dark truth. A few years ago, researchers conducted experiments in an underground facility to harness lunar mana. They chose a young girl as a living vessel for this explosive cosmic power. That child, oppressed by an irresistible force imposed on her, could only sob alone. But now, at this moment, he looks into her eyes and gives a simple, firm confirmation of his fate. She freezes for a moment, stunned by his complete certainty. She listened as he offered a more poetic interpretation of her origin. hinting that it was better to believe she simply came down from the moon. Aloud pondering how romantic such a thought seemed, trying to lighten the heavy atmosphere of her confession. She listened as he offered a more poetic interpretation of her origin, hinting that it was better to believe she simply came down from the moon. Aloud pondering how romantic such a thought seemed, trying to lighten the heavy atmosphere of her confession. She paused at the word, whispering it to herself, and a faint blush flooded her cheeks. For a moment, the burden of her past seemed to recede, yielding to the quiet, focused wonder in his gaze. Suddenly, her behavior changed to playful theatricality. She teased him by asking if bullying one's own wife counts as harassment. He immediately cut off all objections sharply and firmly reminded her that they were not actually married. He could only sigh in response to her antics and note to himself, she still used this term incorrectly from beginning to end. But that brief moment of frivolity gave a sip of distraction from the grim reality of her creation. That moment of lightness was abruptly cut off as a disgusting, nauseating smell suddenly struck him. He jerked his gaze, squinted, and looked around the dark outskirt string to understand what could emit such a deadly stench. When both tensed up, he called her name and warned her, but she was already ahead. She confirmed that she recognized the scent and her face turned stone cold as the playful girl from a moment ago disappeared. A monstrous, gigantic figure emitting malice emerged from the shadows. She immediately identified where the stick was flying from and declared it to be a vile, unmistakable stench of demonic kind. Alan's voice cuts through the silence of the alley as he demands to say what he is doing in the hood and Thenwith, the person lying collapsed on the ground. He is left with only terrifying silence in response when the creature suddenly leaps upward and with unnatural agility climbs up the building wall. Irritation grows. He hisses curses at the escaping shadow and cannot stop its rapid retreat over the rooftops. Immediately rushes to the side of the fallen, kneels down and checks if Hesh is still conscious after the clash. Relief washes over him the moment he realizes, despite being unconscious, the young woman is still breathing. He looks up as soon as Kaguya appears, quickly orders her to take the wounded woman to the clinic, and sets off to search for the demon himself. He endures her skeptical look as she asks if he can really handle this chase alone. But he does not back down. He tells her to leave this matter to him. He directs his mana into a strengthening spell, jerks himself upward, and from there watches how his target moves across the distant islands. He is sprinting full speed across the rooftops, shouting a vow on the go. This creature will not escape his justice tonight. Suddenly he is covered by a cloud of shrill bloodbaths. Leathery wings beat him as he jumps from roof to roof. There are too many of them, and because of this he loses his train of thought until he realizes the demon summoned familiars to disrupt his pursuit. Displeased by the obstacles, the young swordsman slashes through the air, cursing that the demon can control such pests. He is irritated by this swarm. Every second he spends swatting them away gives his target a chance to gain a bit more distance. He sharply inhales to take his nerves under control. For a moment he closes his eyes and gathers his thoughts. Relying on fencing techniques in the Zelencia style, he prepares to deliver the decisive strike to break through the blockade from. With a sudden burst of speed, he dashes forward, shouting the name of his technique Wild Thrust, and cutting through the darkness crashes through it. The move works. He closes the distance and finally raises his blade close to the fleeing demon. The hooded figure glances back with a throw. Her shining eyes widen sharply in shock as the man overcomes the distraction of the bewildering bulls. She did not expect such persistence and speed from the pursuer. Despite the accurate strike, the swarm does not retreat and continues to harass him, and the demon breaks free again in the instant chaos. Swallowing frustration through clenched teeth, he calls the creature to stop. He already understands. To put an end to this chase once and for all, he needs a different approach. Alan dashed forward with a shout, and his blade drew a jagged arc in the air. The dark-winged creature whimpered as steel cut into its body, and dark liquid splattered in the night. He watches as the beast takes off into the sky, and its silhouette disappears against the pale moon. Standing alone in a narrow alley, sword still in combat grip, he rages at not being able to pin the monster before it melted into the shadows. The silence of the night covers the city, only the soft glow of a lantern outside the local clinic breaks it. In the quiet infirmary silence, he sits exhausted on a wooden bench while a mysterious woman in a dark kimono watches him intently. She notices his empty hands with barely concealed mockery, but he can only grimly apologize for the escape and then asks about the woman they saved. His companion reassures him. The medicine stabilized the victim, so she is saved. It gleams on his head. The burden of his perceived defeat weighs on his shoulders as he admits. The solo chase after the demon was a tactical mistake. She waves her hand and cuts off his guilt, ordering him not to dwell on this failure. She still reflects, if he could not keep up with this creature, then others would have had no chance. Then she points to a scrap of material clenched in his hand as a possible clue. When he looks at the evidence, his determination strengthens and he swears, the next encounter will not end in retreat. His sudden resolve provokes a playful laugh from her, and she teases him about his new passion, calling the sight very cute. He blushes with embarrassment and shyly asks her to stop the flattery. As the two step into the cool night air, the search continues fruitlessly for another 2 days. The demon was driven in the chase, and it hid. But the threat remains. The starving predator will sooner or later hunt again, and they must be ready to strike before another life is at risk. He stood right by the clinic, intently watching the blood-stained rag, the only clue the demon left behind. Nearby, a special big hero observed him, smiling reservedly and confidently. He turned to her and handed over a piece of fabric, deciding to take a chance on her incredible abilities. He immediately asked her to smell the fabric, hoping that her scents could catch their elusive prey. He watched as she blinked in surprise. Her face went blank for a moment. He quickly reminded her of her own words, that she could sense the scent of the demon race, and he asked if she could follow this particular trail. Then she rebuffed his request with a playful smile twist. Although she admitted that she was sensitive to such disgusting smells, with a slight teasing nuance she made it clear. She was not some ordinary hound capable of tracking prey all over the city. She watched as he slumped forward at her feet, his shoulders dropping while his brilliant plan cracked and crumbled. He muttered to himself how confident he seemed that it would work. He looked up when she suddenly changed her manner sharply and provocatively froze in a pose as if embodying the traits he demanded. She heard. If this was his desire, she would gladly become his dog or even his cat, vowing to fulfill her role as a devoted partner with all she had. She laughed when he twitched from pure shock and his face flared up. He screamed madly for her to stop her jokes. When she pretended to start undressing to embarrass him even more, he desperately apologized and begged to put an end to this spectacle. He was interrupted by the appearance of an adventuress with pink hair. She approached the calm air. She explained that she was looking for Bramich, and proudly told that she had achieved a perfect result on the final exams at the academy and earned genuine praise from the young man who was still trembling from shock. She stands still. Just arrived, Kaguya's attention shifts to her. With a playful yet sharp gaze, the special great hero asks Alan who this young lady is. He senses a spark of rivalry in Kaguya's eyes and understands. He is caught between two dangerous women. Because of this questioning, he quickly introduces her as his girlfriend. Kaguya echoes this word with a hint of amusement, then officially states her name. The confession hits the young woman almost physically. She freezes in shock and finally composes her face together with the legendary title of a special great hero. In response to her shock, Kaguya casually remarks that she knows the girl because she studies at Hero Academy. Alan is impressed by this recognition, but also notices how calmly his friend behaves in the presence of the unattainable figurias it should be meeting that did not exist at all in the original story. He notices how Kaguya gives a rare compliment and notes that the girl has considerable potential. This praise impresses the student so much that he feels incredibly honored, and he barely restrains his excitement because he sees such a rare and unexpected event. Despite the seriousness of the moment, she tries to steer the conversation back to her original purpose. Charlene's eyes flash with a tense, inquisitive look. Her voice is demanding, dry with truth. She asks what their closeness with Silva really is. She trembles at the mention of the wife. Her mind desperately tries to reconcile this with her belief that Silva was single. Nearby, Alan begins to sweat profusely. He feels the sharp, competitive mood now directed straight at him. For a moment, he is paralyzed by the weight of the situation and he realizes Charles is truly jealous. Although the attention is somewhat pleasant, he sees the urgent need to dispel the misunderstanding before it escalates further. The young man immediately intervenes and explains. The woman simply decided to claim the title of wife for herself. He emphasizes that their real relationship is only friendship and business partnership. He continues and explains that they work together to investigate a recent series of vampire attacks. Their cooperation, he clarifies, involves regular patrols to keep the security of this territory under control. Realizing that an investigation has begun, Charles notes, rumors about these vampire attacks are already spreading through the academy. Driven by duty and perhaps a still-burning sense of competition, she insists on joining the efforts. Her proposal is met with a contemptuous smile and closed eyes from the dark-haired woman. She waves it off, asking what some mere friend of Silva can do. This barb only fuels her determination. She declares that she herself has the power to be useful. While the friction between the two women does not subside, elsewhere a solemn ritual begins. Clasping their hands in fervent prayer, they whisper an incantation, and as soon as its call sounds, a complex magical circle explodes with dazzling light. Charles summons the Fenrir wolf, and a blinding glow bursts from beneath the earth. Kaguya watches the spectacle intently, noting that summoning magic is quite a fascinating field. When the glow fades, she gently presses against the large white wolf, introducing him as Luru. She explains that her spirit magic allows her to summon bound spirits like Fenrir when needed. Barely hearing the name, Alan remarks that it sounds so cute for such a creature. The wolf responds with an excited bark, and the young man is surprised by its friendly behavior. Because the beast looks so friendly, he reaches out his hand to pet it, and this shocks Charles into complete disbelief. She watches them, stunned. Luru has been with her since childhood and has never warmed up to anyone else. He realizes the full weight of this interaction. In his former knowledge, he remembers that touching this particular spirit was only possible after reaching the maximum level of closeness with its master. While he continues to indulge the wolf, Kaguya comments on how cute it is to see a creature so easily expose its belly. Alan is completely overwhelmed by the unexpected charm of the spirit. But as soon as she tries to approach stealthily, the wolf's mood instantly changes to a low, defensive growl. She is clearly offended by the refusal, and Charles just laughs and explains that this cold reception is a normal reaction, so Alan's bond is truly exceptional. Returning to the mission, Charles says, Leroy has the ability to track the scent of demons. Hearing this, he takes out a piece of cloth and asks if the wolf can follow the trail it left. He firmly holds the piece of cloth while the large wolf spirit leans closer, its nose twitches, catching the scent. Charles watches intently, urging Lareth Ladder must pick up the trail. Suddenly, the spirit's head jerks sharply upward and a sharp bark cuts through the air. Charles's eyes widen with understanding. Leroy has already caught the scent, and he asks if the spirit has found their target. Seeing the clear reaction of the spirit, the group prepares to move. Alan addresses his companions, calling Charles and Kaguya to get ready. They both nod firmly and without hesitation, and their looks only grow more determined. With a sharp command to begin the pursuit, Alan leads the charge and bursts into the dark Aleth, hand already gripping the hilt of the blade as they rush after the trace still lingering from their enemy. The group reaches a solitary wooden structure under the cover of night, the silence of the forest tightly pressing in on them from all sides. They stand before the building. The large white wolf leads them forward as they prepare for what awaits ahead in the shadows. The beast barks sharply and thereby confirms the scent coming from there. Kaguya turns to the young man, asks if they intend to rush in all together or if he has a more thought-out plan. She shakily shakes her head and decides. Only he and Char will enter and Kaguya will stay outside as backup. She lowers her gaze. A warning is heard in her voice as she asks if it will really be okay for the two of them alone. She reminds him of their failure yesterday. Doubt clouds her face as she recalls how their prey managed to slip away the last time they crossed paths. He gives her a reassuring smile, acknowledges her correctness, but insists his decision is the best given the circumstances. The swordswoman explains, her incredible strength is too destructive for the tight quarters of this building, so they need a reliable observer to ensure no one slips away this time. Beside him, Charles gently strokes the wolf, fully ready to wait for the signal to move. His words strike her heart and she looks at him now with new softness, understanding how deeply he weighs her strengths and the tactical needs of the mission. She clings to him with happy embraces, and her voice rings with playful admiration as she asks if this sudden closeness is a spark of love. He, however, remains indifferent, brushing off her romantic thoughts dryly, exhaling a tired sigh, while the others just watch silently. With amazing humility accepting his refusal, the sorceress steps back and proclaims that she will carry out his orders as a testament to the loyalty she claims to feel. He responds by giving her a small, soothing smile, and promises that they will not allow a single living soul, not even a single stray insect, to slip through their perimeter, while she stands guard outside. Refocusing on the matter, the young leader addresses his companions. Deciding that the great white wolf should lead the squad, he has extraordinarily sharp senses. The beast responds with an impatient bark, pressing its whole body against the hand, stroking its head, while the owner talks about his deep dependence on the creature's instincts in the upcoming trial. When everything is in place in the vanguard, he orders the pink-haired adventuress to stay slightly behind and watches to ensure she is safe while they prepare to step into the unknown. He steps to the overhanging threshold of the dilapidated house. He takes out a weapon and gives the final signal to begin the infiltration. They enter the shadow of the building, the air thick with dust, and the only light flickers over scattered crates and cracked wooden boards. He is the first to enter the dark interior, and the heavy door clicks and thunders behind him. Charles presses closer beside her, her face tense with anxiety as the shadows of the building engulf them. She lifts her gaze to him. Her face flushes with a blush, shame mixed with genuine fear. With a trembling, quiet voice, she apologizes, admitting that the oppressive atmosphere is already starting to weigh on her. Noticing her vulnerability, he reminds himself, Despite her status, she is still just a student from Hero Academy. It is only natural for her to feel awkward in this place and a wave of protective instinct flares up in him. When she clings to his hand, a sudden thought flashes through his mind. Could this closeness to his favorite heroine be just a dream? He sharply shakes off the distraction and refocuses on the mission. Suddenly, a low, threatening growl bursts from Lily caught the scent. He tenses, shifts his gaze to the white wolf, and asks what provoked such a sharp reaction. Vovk stands ready before the tattered wooden gate, his gaze fixed on the threshold. He understands everything they seek is inside, and he orders Charles to stay aside and be near Lil for safety. He slowly pushes the door inward. Rusty hinges creak in the silence. Inside, he notices a figure in a familiar dark robe confirmation. They really found the person they were looking for. Before he can take a step closer, the figure jerks with unnatural speed and lunges at him. He barely manages to orient himself. Instincts scream that something deadly is wrong in this encounter as he prepares to defend himself. Silence at the moment he lunges no sound at all. Alan prepares to end the fight right here, using the refined techniques of the Zaylancha fencing school. He tears the unbearable arc of steel upward. The power of lifting technology tears the air, and its opponent just the same. He lowers the blade when the threat turns into a heap, and for a moment a slight surprise appears on his face. He realizes how easily the enemy was defeated. He stares motionless at the fallen one, wondering whether the enemy was really that weak or if his own abilities had already exceeded expectations. Moment later, the tension begins to subside and Charles and Lil join in. She cautiously asks if the battle is finally over. He accepts her praise with a blush and, rubbing the back of his head, tries to brush off the incredible power of his single strike. He insists it was just luck, or that he barely got lucky, but his wistful smile reveals inner satisfaction from her wide-open eyes. He suddenly notices how she freezes as soon as a quiet rustling rises nearby. Turning to him, she asks if he heard it too. He nods seriously and confirms there was a sound. He follows her example. When she points toward the corner, he notices what requires their immediate attention. She makes her way through the cluttered warehouse, and the white wolf follows her closely. Suddenly, a sharp clink sounds behind a stack of wooden crates, and both freeze in place. Because of that sudden sound, she and her companion cautiously peek from behind the corner, and their eyes widen in disbelief. There, in the shadow, something is hidden. There, pinned together on the cold floor, lie several women, their hands tied, mouths gagged with cloth, and muffled sobs breaking through the fabric. He watches the prisoners closely. While his thoughts race, must grasp the scale of cruelty they have encountered and wonder how many lives were simply swung here like toys. For a moment, heavy silence is broken by a familiar sonorous voice. Captain Elda bursts into the room. On her face is a triumphant smile, and she loudly calls Silva. She almost shines with pride, praising him not only for defeating the vampire but also for finding the missing townspeople, and he seems to be confused by her overly passionate physical affection. Nearby, Kaguya watches the scene with noticeable irritation, reminding the captain that she also contributed to this. In response, she throws out a short, almost formal word of thanks to the special great hero, and this only further fuels Kaguya's irritation. She clicks her tongue in annoyance. When the situation calms down, the captain announces that she intends to report to the command. The crisis was successfully averted thanks to the joint efforts of Silva, Kaguya, and Charles, while the young man remains blinking in confusion at the sudden turn of events. Alan lowers his gaze, his voice softens, and he begs Captain Elda not to mention his role in the report, explaining that he wants to remain unnoticed. She tilts her head, and a question appears in her soft, barely interested expression. What exactly could be troubling him so much? She gives him a bright, mischievous smile, if hinting that his growing fame will only give her more leverage to recruit him into the Night Order. He can only freeze and remain silent. The one single question hangs over his head as the weight of her words settles. He immediately protests, wildly waving his hands, reminding her that she promised to give up the idea of prying into him. She does not flinch for a moment. Their cheerful behavior sharply contrasts with his desperate attempts to make her keep the promise. The captain simply pretends not to understand, playfully touching her chin with her fingers and aloud wondering if she ever said such a thing at all. Before he can object, she clears her throat and changes the subject, announcing that it is finally time to resolve the issue of their well-deserved reward. He freezes. Cold sweat appears on his forehead, and a wave of fear overwhelms him completely. He truly believed he had finally broken free from the relentless circle of her recruitment attempts, but the realization that he is still firmly in her sight shatters his reality. She breaks his trance by throwing a heavy pouch of coins aside and declaring that it is the official payment both for taming the demon and for the successful rescue of the hostages. He instinctively grabs the pouch, feeling the weight of the gold, a tangible reminder of the chaotic events of the day. Molodic clutches the award in his hands, but his thoughts instantly return to the victims they found in the warehouse. He looks up at Hera's sincere look and asks how the women they managed to save are feeling now and exactly where they are. She assures him that all the targets are unharmed. They were pulled out so quickly after the kidnapping that there were no significant injuries and they recovered almost immediately. Her gaze softens slightly as she recalls the grim possibility that they were kept as a food source a dark fate barely avoided. She watches as the young man sinks into his thoughts. On his face is a shadow of doubt that won't let go. He cannot shake the feeling that something was off in their recent meeting. A stubborn suspicion increasingly pulls at him, tugs at the corners of his mind as if things are not as simple as they seem. As he walks away, his thoughts still rush forward. He analyzes the behavior of the vampire they just encountered. It seemed too thoughtless to act with such calculated intent. Because of this, he decides he lacks information. He dares to go to the church, hoping their archives might hold answers about the true nature of these creatures and the wisdom they might be hiding. His sudden retreat does not go unnoticed by the two women watching him. Hirofamina leans forward with a playful wave, her voice flowing with curiosity as she asks what is weighing so heavily on his thoughts. Meanwhile, the silver-haired captain looks on with a mixture of surprise and concern, observing his sharp change in mood and wondering what exactly is pressing so hard within him. He stands before the special great hero who acknowledges his hard work and sends him to rest. The hero modestly brushes off the praise and insists that his efforts were nothing special. When he moves away from the guarded entrance, a heavy silence falls upon him, and a cloud of doubts that have not yet gone away freezes on his face. Sensing his discomfort, she leans closer. Her voice is a playful whisper. She notices that something is clearly bothering him. She still walks beside him, confidently insisting that she can read him perfectly through their connection. He is suddenly shaken. How did she so easily see through his facades? He admits that he still cannot untangle his thoughts and furrows his brow, trying to explain where this confusion comes from. She listens attentively, encouraging him to tell what exactly is on his mind. With a light laugh, she says that his serious, focused look is very charming and compares him to a detective on a case. He sighs and asks her to stop teasing him at such a moment. Her face warms into an understanding smile as she says she hopes he will find the answers he seeks. Calling him her wonderful detective again, she explains that since the incident has just been resolved, she will have to return to her moonlight bathing to restore her mana. He sincerely apologizes for dragging her along for so many days, but she quickly brushes off his worries. She reminds him it was she who asked him to keep her company, and with the last wave, they part ways. He struggles with a heavy bag of coins, trying to divide the reward fairly, but Kaguya waves off the gold as if it's just small change. With a quiet, confident smile, she admits, the time spent with him is more than enough compensation for her efforts. Before leaving, she rolls up to him, teasing his flushed face and playfully asking if her words made him blush. He can only scratch the back of his head, feigning awkward silence, while she meanwhile calls her dear husband to see him off, as if grandly and flatteringly. Instead of entering through the door like a normal guest, she easily and gracefully jumps from the balcony into the night air. He watches her with his eyes and has no idea why she always stages such theatrical departures, until he catches himself being confused by her last playful warning not to be unfaithful. The boy stands alone under the endless sky, staring at the place where she disappeared. Her farewell words about betrayal spin like a deaf echo in his head, and he is completely bewildered by her mysterious sense of humor. Shaking off his confusion, he rushes down the stone stairs of the estate with a trembling gait, leans his shoulder against the door, and bursting inside, calls out an apology for keeping his companion waiting so long. Charlotte is waiting for him. She greets him with a warm, gentle smile that radiates relief. When she asks where Kaguya is, he explains, the mysterious woman had other matters and is already on her way home. He shines, looks at her and sincerely thanks, insists that everything worked out only thanks to her unwavering support. She brushes off the praise with a quiet gesture and says, she only did what anyone would have done in her place. He acknowledges that her contribution will definitely be reflected in the academic records and feels even deeper gratitude. Looking at her joyful face, he understands. Seeing her safe and happy is the best reward he could hope for. Yet he still hands her a pouch of gold as a sign of their shared victory. He feels as if struck by thunder when she decisively refuses her share of the reward. Her sudden no momentarily confuses him. He cannot understand why she refuses such a significant sum. Due to his bewilderment, he explains, and she, not backing down, lays out her principles. She says she only tracked down the demon and believes the reward should be accepted only after she truly defeats him by her own strength as a formal hero. He listens, still tightly clutching the heavy bag of coins, while determination and integrity shine through her words. Deeply moved by her words, he looks intently at her, and a new respect appears in his gaze. His heart fills with pride for the noble path she has chosen. He feels, her spirit is truly exceptional, far beyond anything he has had to compare himself to. Despite her refusal of the gold, she admits there is something else she desires. This prompts him enthusiastically to offer to buy her everything her heart wishes for. He is ready to spend every coin from the reward to express gratitude for her support. In response to Zedgernis, she gives a soft, understanding smile. Her cheeks barely flush with a light blush as she explains, what she desires cannot be bought with any amount of money. This cryptic answer makes him itch with confusion. He cannot fathom what she could have meant if not something material. She looks at him intently, and the expression on her face softens even more as she prepares to tell the truth. Finally, she blushes to tears and casts a glance full of hidden tenderness, admitting, the only thing she truly wants is for him to spend time with her more often. Alan looks at his reflection, his eyebrows furrowed. Anxiety and uncertainty battle within him. He mumbles to himself about not being able to choose the right clothes, and the coming day weighs on him with full force. His thoughts repeatedly return to what exactly is gnawing at him, the cause of this turmoil, the upcoming meeting with Charles. He still cannot believe he is actually going on a date with her favorite person, and all he really wants is to spend time with her in a way that means something. A sudden heavy thud on the doorframe shatters his dream into pieces. It's Modi calling out unusually normally, hoarsely and roughly, asking if he wants to grab something for lunch. Startled, looking around fearfully, he rushes past his senior officer and, choking on apologies, blurts out, he has a date today, so he'll catch up another time, and leaves the very same man standing in the corridor. The veteran guard froze in place, his jaw dropped because the word date echoed in his memory. He found it hard to comprehend that the young man really had a romantic appointment. Meanwhile, in the bustling square near the fountain, the young man felt like a complete nervous breakdown. He stood trembling, thoughts raced, and insecurity gnawed from within. He had no experience in such matters even after his past life as a corporate employee. When he finally noticed her, he tried to greet her cheerfully, but nerves got the better of him. It came out too formally, dryly, and stiffly. He instantly pulled himself together as soon as she approached and apologized for the delay. He was immediately as if disconnected from reality. He silently and soundlessly froze. She stood before him not in her usual traveler's gear, but in a stunning, elegant dress, and he was completely captivated by her gaze. She uttered a soft greeting, but her face quickly lost its calm as soon as she noticed the tears welling up in his eyes. He was so struck by her presence that he barely held back his emotions, so she asked if he was really crying. Due to the sudden outburst, he wiped his eyes and apologized, explaining that seeing her in such beautiful everyday clothes was too joyful for him. In response, she reached out her hand and, gently smiling, stroked his head to soothe his restless heart. While she found his intense reaction a bit strange, he remained lost in his own world, clutching his chest as if he had reached the peak of his life. He was filled with such a sense of completeness that he could face any end without regret, even as they began walking together. This dramatic internal struggle made his spirit start to dissolve, and he looked like an empty shell. Seeing this, she panicked and shouted for him to come to his senses before his soul disappeared completely, and this finally jerked him back to reality. Regaining his composure, he gave a shy apology for the scare and politely greeted her again. She accepted it with a warm, radiant smile, and her eyes sparkled as she welcomed the start of their day. As they fell into rhythm, he asked what she would like. She immediately responded, a walk to the shops and then a visit to the new cafe that had just opened. He didn't hesitate for a second and promised he would go with her wherever her heart led. With plans already set, the couple walked through the noisy city streets side by side. There was lightness and promise in the air as they blended with the crowd of townspeople. In a moment, they were already deep into the walk. She excitedly rummaged through racks of elegant dresses. He walked almost right behind her, politely carrying their purchases and enthusiastically giving a thumbs up to every outfit she tried on. She leads through the bustling market. Her eyes flash with joy as she receives another package from the seller. Nearby, Alan has already disappeared into a pile of shopping bags and barely keeps up with her brisk pace. He is almost buried under their purchases, his hands full of various packages. Despite the burden, she happily does not suspect, pressing the last acquisition to her chest and floating in a satisfied, dreamy smile. Eventually, they find a moment to rest. They go out to a cozy cafe with a wooden sign above the door. She is the first to go inside and reaches for a free seat, and he almost immediately follows her, still holding the remnants of their shopping spree. When they settle in a quiet corner, steam rises between them from a fresh cup of coffee, breaking the cozy silence. He cautiously asks why she decided to invite him. Tade feels there might be more to this walk than just shopping. Her face softens, and in that moment vulnerability breaks through as she admits she just wanted to be alone with him after so many days. She confesses that she carried a heavy burden in her mind and felt that only with him could she truly talk. She begins to explain where this feeling of anxiety comes from. She recalls her time at Hero Academy and how relationships are developing in her current team. She says that the party leader, a man named Alan, behaves in a way that truly frightens her. Lowering her gaze to the table, she tells how the leader constantly flirts with other girls from their group. Because of this behavior, the team became awkward, and it is getting harder for her every day to feel part of her own collective as if she is a stranger. The revelation throws him off track. Thoughts race wildly to comprehend the consequences of such behavior from an alleged hero. Meanwhile, Brajo, hearing about the situation, asks the two if they are even in a relationship, thereby highlighting how confusing the leader's actions appear. He froze and stared into the distance as thoughts raced, as if something inside stirred a troubling awareness. The idea that his version from this world might walk a dangerous path through the complex and treacherous trembling root of the Hammerin cold down his spine. Because of this, he recalls the strict rules of the game he once knew. Loyalty must be perfectly balanced, and any mistake or premature decision immediately rejects everyone. He glanced at Charles, wondering if her feelings were already starting to spoil under the weight of his, as it seemed to him, hesitations. She sits opposite, not taking her eyes off her tea, and quietly expresses dissatisfaction. She trusts him as a friend, but the thought that he will start pursuing others despite already being in a relationship with someone truly worries her. Continuing her thought, she recalls frequent and persistent invitations she received from others and stubbornly refused all of them. He listens silently, and a drop of sweat slowly trickles down his temple. The burden of her loyalty weighs on his conscience. He covers his eyes in a fit of inner shame, recalling how many times in his former life he went through these same scenarios. Nearby, she turns away, her cheeks burning as she begins to confess something more personal. She falls into heavy silence, her cheeks burning bright crimson, and the words do not obey. When he pushes her, she quickly brushes off the moment, leaving him stunned and even more confused than before. Slowly taking a sip of her drink, she gives a small, restrained, knowing smile and explains. A woman's heart is a labyrinth of complexity, where secrets are hidden that even he is not allowed to know. This revelation hits him as if physically, and he slumps forward from shock. He can hardly comprehend the riddle she laid out before him. The mind goes mad from the unexpected depth of her hidden thoughts. He sits opposite Charles, and the tension from their previous conversation still hangs in the air when suddenly from the other end of the room a familiar, commanding voice calls her name. Charles blinks in surprise, her eyes widen sharply, and she looks toward where they were interrupted, trying to understand who could have recognized her in such a place. The newcomers moved toward their table, a confident young man with a blossoming cloak that radiated delight, as if there could be no better occasion, led the way. On his left and right stood two young women in academic uniforms, whose appearance instantly transformed the quiet cafe into a crowded and completely different place, noisy and energetic. She looks at them in disbelief, her voice trembling as she asks why exactly Margarita and Lena ended up here among all other places. The boy in the cloak replies indifferently, with a self-satisfied smile, and throws into the hall that the three of them are now walking together, just like on this day. The girl with short hair, Lena, leans toward Charles. There is a mischievous spark in her eyes. Jokingly, she reminds him of the time she invited Charles to join their group, hinting that Charles is the one currently lacking a place in this game. He takes a slow, measured sip of tea, while his thoughts wildly bustle as he processes the consequences of this meeting. Now it is clear to him. The man before them is indeed meeting both women at once, confirming his suspicions about the current state of world history. This thought triggers memories in his head about the game mechanics. Lena and Margarita were then known as heroines with a low difficulty level. They actively encouraged the protagonist to expand the harem. Now, seeing them, he understands that the harem route is already in full swing in his counterpart, who seems to be following the script exactly. The discomfort of the situation weighs on him as he watches a group lively chatting among themselves and realizes how difficult it is to shift party moods within the social structure of the academy. He sees tension frozen on Charles's face just as it is on his own when forced to be caught between two sides in this explosive social circle. An educated young man in a cloak finally averts his gaze from Charles. Curiosity appears in him, and he asks her to introduce the man sitting nearby. The tone is friendly, yet it carries the natural charisma of a protagonist. He freezes in place, stunned by the revelation that Charles is on a date right now. While she tries to explain the situation, the man she is with introduces himself, Silva, just a doorman, and he keeps his modest mask despite the tension in the air. His eyes widen as soon as he suddenly feels something strange, a change in the atmosphere that throws him off balance. The golden-maned hero begins to sweat. His face twitches with tense concentration as he suddenly realizes that the magic is slipping out of control. Nearby, Silva watches this with barely noticeable confusion, as if unaware of the growing magical pressure in the room. He is overcome by a fit of jealous rage. He growls that he cannot believe Charles rejected his own invitation just to spend time with some ordinary passerby character, like this gatekeeper. His insults hit hard, so Charles sharply retorts, defending her companion and orders him to behave with respect. She decides that this is enough, stands up and suggests to Sylvie to find a quieter place to continue the conversation. When she turns around, she firmly warns the Heronot to follow them. He remains sitting, sinking helplessly in complete shock and disbelief. He does not let them go so easily. While his thoughts race wildly, he comes to a dark and sudden conclusion. With a grim realization, he will point a finger and declare, "An ordinary person cannot be Charles, so this is a man disguised as a demon." The hero continues the baseless attack. He pulls out fresh rumors about demons abducting women in this area and accuses Silva of the deed. He is convinced that Charles is being deceived, and this gatekeeper is just a monster waiting for the right moment to strike. The training grounds of Hero Academy stretched endlessly and were open-a place created for honing combat skills. In this arena, a young man named Silva stood opposite his opponent, while Charlotte watched anxiously from the sideline. Brijo, wrapped in noble attire, commented on the choice of location with disdain trembling in his voice. He drew the blade with a steady hand, narrowing his eyes as he prepared for the duel, while Brajo mocked his determination, warning, he would regret it even if he fought with all his might. When he stood his ground, she lowered her head, and her voice trembled as she apologized for dragging him into this mess and causing such a situation. The swordsman immediately interrupted her, stating that she had nothing to be blamed for, and, casting his hardened gaze at the opponent, declared unequivocally, "Only the man standing right before them must apologize." While he was preparing for the clash, his comrades watched from the side. Margarita unconditionally believed in his victory over such a pitiful threat, and Lena encouraged him let him rush into battle as soon as possible so they could continue their day. Their unshakable faith only fueled the pride of the noble. He laughed at the thought of defeat and boasted that Charles would soon tremble with admiration for his advantage as soon as the battle ended. His words ignited a cold rage in the young warrior. He silently vowed to wipe that smug smile off the noble's face and force sincere apologies for the insults thrown at the teenager. Charles gives him a final word of support. She admits, although she knows how strong he really is, she still wants to encourage him, begging for victory. A confident smile and a thumbs up, he reassures her, saying let all this be on him. He again shifts his gaze to the duel. The slender fencer faces the mocking Brajo. The nobleman sneers and asks if some guard on duty is really ready, even mocking his worn-out equipment. The young man does not falter a step, simply says, "Let your opponent attack as soon as he is ready." He calmly and evenly draws his blade, remarking that such simple equipment is quite enough to handle an opponent of Brajo's level. The insult hits the mark. The noble's face twists into a silent, bitter hiss as he prepares to strike. Suddenly, the air whistles. Brajo rushes forward in a furious swing and shouts for his opponent to stop tricking. But the strike hits only empty space. Skillfully and smoothly, the guard slips aside, knocking the blade aside, and the noble momentarily opens his eyes and, not believing in the ease of the dodge, falls while moving. While the nobleman has not yet recovered, the young man is already inside. His defense movements are agile and precise. Brajo's breath catches in his throat, and his eyes widen. He suddenly realizes he has completely lost track of his opponent's location. A loud crack tears through the air on the training field as a heavy fist bites into the noble's defensive stance. The incredible force of the blow makes Brajo's whole body tremble. He lets out a painful groan from his chest, and with his last strength tries to stay on his feet under the weight of this attack. The impulse pushed the noble so hard that he was thrown back over the dirty ground. Boots tore deep furrows as he desperately tried to hold on. Barely breathing out air, he wonders, could such devastating power be the result of high-level physical enhancement magic? He pulls his gaze away and stares back at the calm figure opposite. Only now does it dawn on him, his opponent is much more than that pitiful gatekeeper he pretended to be. His arrogance vanishes, and a sharp, cautious aim flashes in his eyes as he finally realizes the real threat standing before him. He freezes in stunned silence while his opponent casually throws the sword to the ground. The young Brahmaster simply shrugs, reminding the noble that he is exactly who he claimed to be, Murgard. The noble's face, filled with misunderstanding, flares with anger as he demands an explanation for such blatant contempt. Under the nobleman's fury, the young man only confidently twists his fingers, cracking his knuckles and smiling as if to say he has enough bare hands to deal with someone of that level. This provocation throws the aristocrat off balance. His face contorts with rage, and he shouts at the commoner in madness not to underestimate him. With a desperate roar, the nobleman lunged forward, but his blade cut only empty air. The guard easily shifted and never let the strike connect. Sliding past him at a furious speed, the youth delivered a devastating blow right to the opponent's midsection, and from the force of the impact, the nobleman slid backward along the ground. He gasps for air, his eyes widening with agony and disbelief as the realization of defeat begins to sink in. The force of that one blow knocks him off his feet, cannot recover. His composure crumbled along with his pride. On the side, spectators silently watch as the scene unfolds, frozen in shock, their faces reflecting the same astonishment as the fallen nobleman. The young woman with pink hair can only stare blankly, her mouth agape as she sees the power that proved overwhelming from the man she had considered merely an ordinary gatekeeper. The blow proves devastating. The arrogant nobleman crashes into the stone wall with such force that the masonry cracks. Lena and Margarita can only freeze in stunned silence, their minds racing. How can a single strike have such an effect on the ground? The defeated warrior tightly grips his sword, trembling with pain and pure rage. Due to the severity of his wounds, she quickly kneels beside him, her hands flickering with the soft light of a healing spell. She calls out to him desperately to hold on, her voice trembling as she tries to heal the damage from the devastating blow. While they were providing aid to the wounded nobleman, the young man who had struck scratched the back of his head with a shy, satisfied smile. After the scuffle, he felt relief, but somewhere deep in his soul whispered, maybe he had overdone it a little. He watches as two girls struggle, trying to lift their fallen comrade to his feet. His pride is shattered as clearly as the wall behind him. The nobleman's face is a mask of stern defeat. He cannot even look into the eyes of the one who defeated him so easily. With a heavy, determined face, he approaches them and makes his intentions clear. He came to take Charles back. He says he cannot just turn around and leave, must recover what was lost. The sharp change in his behavior confuses Lena. Her eyes widen as she realizes how unwavering his resolve is. His gaze narrows as he utters the final cold truth sharply and unequivocally. Charles never belonged to the nobly and was never meant to be part of that world at all. He emphasizes that the girl is not prey to be taken or traded. His voice is steady, merciless. This sharp refusal drives the nobleman into rage, and he growls, demanding silence, his face twisted with despair. He thunders that they are bound by powerful love, repeating it with wild intensity as if trying to convince himself first and foremost, as well as his opponent. And his desperate assertion only confuses the young man, who can only remain frozen in silence, frowning. He gets lost in words. He does not understand how anyone can say such a thing while hypocritically maintaining a direct gaze. He is crouching before the looming, shadowy creature, the blade already in hand, and swearing to his comrades, vows to hold back the assault and destroy the Demon King, no matter the cost. Boldly grimacing, he challenges the dark entity, asking if it truly believes it can withstand the resolve of those who fight not only for themselves. He continues his passionate speech, feeling the heartbeat of allies still fighting beside him. He declares, their bond, forged by powerful love, is unbreakable and no enemy can tear it apart. Recalling the legendary story he once witnessed, the young man suddenly finds himself in the thick of the drama. Admitting that the lines are a bit cheesy, but at the same time, he is genuinely moved by the classic heroic tales. Suddenly, the memory of those legendary words crashes into the reality before him, and he sharply inhales, contemplating the absurdity of what is happening. He poked him with a finger, threw accusations, and shouted that such phrases have no place in serious confrontation, ordering an immediate stop to imitating the hero from the legend in such a humiliating manner. In response, the noble grimaces with rage as he shouts that he is destined to become a hero, dismissing the remarks as utter nonsense from someone incapable of understanding his greatness. Standing between two women, he growls his last delusion, insisting that Charles must be near and that without her presence, his path to heroism is impossible. He continues his delirious monologue, not noticing the irritation growing on Alan's face. Alan can only think about how little this man truly understands the situation. His eyes narrow as he listens to the nobleman vainly asserting confidence. Despite the silence of the woman nearby, he clenches his fist and shouts a desperate promise to Charles, swearing to tear her from the hands of her supposed kidnappers and immediately bring her back to his side. His face twisted with overconfidence and despair. While he continues to lose himself in his heroic fantasy, Charles keeps his gaze lowered, and her face reveals nothing until she quietly calls Alan, asking him to listen to what she has to say. Her voice barely trembles under the weight of her determination. Then she turns again to the one shouting, with new clarity in her eyes, and announces that she has finally made a decision, leaving him awkwardly stammering, while his triumphant expression begins to crumble. Abruptly, with loud categoricity, she points to herself and declares that from today she officially leaves his party. The words hang in the air, sharp and unappealable, and strike him as if by a physical blow. His eyes widen sharply, and on his face is pure, sincere shock. This unexpected ultimatum sweeps through the group like a shockwave. Silva and Lena freeze in astonishment, unable to believe the sudden turn of events, and even Alan falls silent for a moment, is knocked off his feet by the force of her determination. She continues, explaining that it was Silva's influence that gave her the courage to break free and go her own way to become a true hero. But Breijo does not accept this truth. She wildly accuses Alan of brainwashing until she finally yells at him to be quiet and listen to her words. A young woman stands her ground and coldly declares that no one controls her, it is her own decision. And he remains trapped in delusions, desperately clinging to the thought of those deep bonds that supposedly existed between them, unable to comprehend that his fantasy has finally shattered. She continues to refuse coldly, clarifying that she once trusted Alan as a comrade but never felt any romantic attraction to Breijo himself. Looking back one last time, she, full of certainty, simply tells him to surrender, and he remains silent, stunned by the sharpness of her words that knock the ground from under his feet. Her refusal drove him to the edge. He tears his face in a grimace of rage, unwilling to let go of his delusions that he would become the strongest hero if she were by his side. With deadly poisonous hatred, he directs his anger at Alan and concludes that everything would be fine if only he were not there before forcibly activating the forbidden technique that sounds like Sabin. Lena yells at Alan when the tension between the groups reaches the limit. Nearby, Breijo tightly squeezes Charles, his face twisted a dark, desperate obsession. Through his obsession, he begins to direct into space a creepy energy, a technique called soul resonance. Stay away, Alan notices the familiar heaviness of magic being woven live. This particular magic is a cruel paradox. It transforms bonds between people into pure power, growing stronger with each bond formed. Choosing this path, the user is forced to constantly seek and deepen relationships, not for companionship but for their own strength. She finally understands the truth. The obsession with Breijo Charles never had anything to do with tenderness, it was cold mathematics to fuel his own ascent. The realization that someone is turning another person into a mere battery for their ambition stirs a silent and restrained disgust within him, slowly smoldering. Echoing his own past mistakes, the young man sees in the desperate eyes of the nobleman a reflection of himself. Charles, trembling with fear, watches, and suddenly a flash of energy, sharp and cruel, bursts from within and shakes the very ground beneath him. He returns to her with a quiet, soothing smile, promising that this will all end soon. He knows, unlike simulations in a game, there are no second chances here, so he cannot afford to fail. In response, Breijo fans his conviction, saying this power will make him the greatest hero capable of saving everyone. But the fencer only snorts at the delusion, asking how someone who makes a girl cry can call himself a hero. Suddenly, with a sharp burst of speed, he lunges forward, the blade already ready to strike. He understands the true cost of power far better than his opponent and intends to put an end to this trick once and for all. He narrows his eyes, determination that transcends this world. The former observer of these events, Alan will not allow anyone to bring sorrow to the one he values. Drawing a sharp breath, he prepares the Zaylansha style and proclaims, "There is no reason to show mercy to those who trample on the lives of others." The blade tears forward with dazzling speed, a single horizontal strike called Blue Sky, slicing through the air like a flash of light on a clear horizon. This decisive blow catches his opponent by surprise. The force of the impact is such that a shockwave rolls across the entire glade as the fencer completes his extended lunge. The energy of the strike tears through the remaining magical defenses, shattering the arrogant display of power into nothingness with a final ringing crack. As the dust begins to settle, Charles wipes tears from his eyes, fear recedes, giving way to deep relief. Nearby, Lena and the others freeze in stunned silence as the swordsman brings the clash to a sudden conclusion. He looms over the defeated enemy, looking coldly and without hesitation, as if to say, maybe now the vanished noble will begin to understand the weight of the human heart. Breijo only stammers in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his ultimate soul resonance magic was so easily shattered. Once a proud nobleman, he now sits on the cold ground, broken, his spirit crushed along with his ambitions, and he silently stares at the earth. Exhaustion finally begins to pull him down, Alan, and the expression on his face softens as the adrenaline fades. He has proven that he is not just a survivor, but a true hero in the eyes of those he fought to protect, earning a title he never expected. The silence on the training grounds is broken by the arrival of a stern instructor. She demands an explanation for all the commotion, and a sharp gaze sweeps over the gathered students. Breijo freezes in shock, his face pales, while Alan and Char watch, suddenly thrown off by her sudden appearance. She is called Professor Labe, and a wave of complete confusion immediately rises in Alan. He frantically rummages through memories of the game world he once knew, convinced there was no character with such a name in the original story. Yet here she is, undeniable, real in this reality. He stammers in a mad explanation, pointing at Alan with a trembling finger and croaks in a voice breaking under the weight of his own lies. He insists there is a terrible suspicion. The young man actually belongs to the demon race and is trying to direct the instructor's authority against his rival. She can barely digest this absurdity of accusation, repeatedly uttering the word demon with a look of pure distrust. The tension in the air thickens as the burden of such a dangerous accusation settles on the entire group. A commanding voice suddenly thunders and immediately the heavy clatter of armor on boots strikes. A figure steps forward and declares with unquestionable authority, the man is not a demon, and she personally guarantees his identity. She reveals herself as Captain Elda Snow White, and her appearance instantly conquers the room. She smiles boldly, saying Silva always ends up at the center of trouble, and she herself was drawn to the training grounds as soon as she felt an incredible surge of magical power. He can only respond with sweat from powerless indignation. He is overwhelmed by the captain's sudden and theatrical intervention. For his sake, Brajo tries to brush it off with a failed plan of laughter, but the trembling irony poorly hides his humiliation. She clarifies the purpose of the visit, says she came to the academy for a meeting regarding upcoming practical exercises. Since a night order will accompany the students for safety, she came to coordinate all the details, leaving Alan to ponder the difficulties ahead. She has just finished the announcement, and as the students began to disperse, the weight of the upcoming exercise hung in the air. Usually in these sessions, hero candidates hunt small demons, but the records of the original story spoke of a much more dangerous encounter, a level 3 ambush that was to be a baptism by fire. He recalled legends about the game's main hero. His first real battle was against such a creature, a moment of fate that charted the hero's path. But now, standing here, he felt that the reality of his situation was far from those epic tales. Suddenly, a joyful, playful voice cut through his haze. The silver-haired captain leaned in and slyly addressed him by his nickname. She laughed, saying it was not very mature to pick on an ordinary hero candidate like Brajo. She continued to tease lightly, her fingers playfully poked him while he tried to keep a straight face. She noticed how his composure faltered and how a nobleman nearby muttered irritably. With a smirk, she added aloud, maybe she overdid it a bit or caused unforeseen problems. The disgraced nobleman could no longer bear the shame and fled, shouting a banal vow of revenge on the way and promising that he himself would settle the score. Watching him disappear, the young man couldn't help but think, such petty quick temper is hardly the behavior expected from a true protagonist. He saw how the angry young man tore away like a whirlwind, ignoring the shouts of his comrade who vainly tried to stop him. The tension in the yard began to subside, turning into the awkward silence of a quarrel ended in public. Leaning even closer, the captain, with a sharp glint in her eyes, noticed that he seemed to have earned himself a considerable amount of antipathy. He could only manage a strained, unpromising reply, feeling the heat of her gaze as she dissected the social ruin he had left behind. Their private conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a girl with pink hair who had been watching the nobleman the whole time. The captain's face changed with recognition. He greeted the newcomer as if he knew her well and asked if she was really the same one known as Shara. She explains that she heard about Charlotte from Silva, more precisely, about how she helped during the incident with the vampires. And when asked if Charlotte is a student of the Heroic Academy, the young woman confirms. She says that Charlotte was always by Silva's side at the moment of his death. Continuing her boasting, she calls Silva the strongest soldier she knows and insists that just being near him will definitely help Charlotte grow. Charlotte, noticeably embarrassed, can only nod quietly, agreeing timidly. This answer even amuses the captain, bursts out laughing, praising the girl for her sharp eye. Meanwhile, the boy scratches the back of his head. It's clear he feels uncomfortable with such praise. And Professor Leap watches the scene, looking restrained and stone-faced. The professor finally steps forward politely, but firmly interrupts and reminds the captain that their scheduled meeting is about to begin. Seeing what time it was, she quickly apologized for the delay, then said goodbye to the two students. The young man, still feeling out of place, apologized for any trouble he might have caused. When she walks away, waving her hand and brushing off his worries, boldly smiling, he is left wondering what kind of strange look she cast at us. Suddenly she turns around, screams wildly in response, and addresses him, Silva. She announces that for his recent reckless behavior at the academy, he is now obliged to participate in the upcoming practical exercise, and laughs, reminding him that he cannot refuse. He just stood there, completely stunned by the sudden command. While his thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of the fact that he had just been shoved into a school event he had been trying to avoid. He stood with his arms crossed, accepting everything with a resigned sigh. Nearby, Charlotte looked down, Guilt was frozen on her face as she apologized for the trouble she had caused him. He admitted that it was his actions, especially his intrusion, that led to this, so there was nothing to complain about. Seeing her despair, he gave her a warm, soothing smile. He firmly said that she had nothing to apologize for, emphasizing that everything he had done was his own choice and by his own will. Continuing the thought, he pointed to the silver lining of a sharp change in events. Now, with this new turn, he could finally leave the party without any aftertaste, lingering complications, or offenses, a prospect that brought him true relief. He looked down and pondered, just realizing Charlotte had actually stepped down from the role of the main heroine of the game's plot. After that, when she was no longer tied to the central storyline, he wondered if her dream of becoming a heroine would really come true. This realization stabbed him with deeper anxiety. If he continued to stubbornly interfere in her life, the future would become completely unpredictable and increasingly diverge from the scene he once knew. He looked back at her and in his mind flashed an avalanche of consequences of these changes, and whether the world would still somehow hold to the original script. He sharply shook his head, shaking off intrusive thoughts, and scolded himself for excessive pondering. He decided that it was enough just to be beside her and support her for him to be happy. She, however, seemed more determined than ever, and explained that his support gave her the courage to go her own way as a heroine even if she had to do it alone. With a soft, deep gaze, she looked directly at him, and her voice softened as she began to speak about the time ahead. Her gaze locked onto his and she began to ask, when that time comes, will he be by her side? That intimate moment was suddenly broken by howling. They found a young boy on the street, sobbing uncontrollably and unable to find comfort, as if lost and left alone. He continued to cry without stopping, his small body trembling as he explained that his parents were nowhere to be seen. Charlene cautiously approached. Her voice was quiet as she asked where his home might be. Alan stood just behind her and repeated the word church with a soft, slightly puzzled grimace, trying to piece together the child's fragmented story. The boy sobbed and explained that he was playing outside with other children, and then somehow ended up near his father's places. His eyes were wide open, still trembling with the fear of getting lost among the noisy streets. Looking around the unfamiliar surroundings, he sighs, as if everyone else simply disappeared. Alan and Charles exchange a knowing glance. Realizing that the boy got separated from his group during the commotion, they become aware of it. Charles turns to his companion and suggests they should safely take the child back to the church. Alan immediately nods and his gaze softens as he takes on the responsibility. He crouches down to the boy's level, asks his name, and smiles friendly. The child whispers that his name is Artie. Noticing how exhausted he is, Alan offers to carry him on his back on the way home. This gesture briefly lights a spark of hope on Artie's face amid the tears. With the young boy firmly secured on his back, he starts the journey through the winding alleys of the city, and Charles stays close, already looking over his shoulder. His initial fear fades, replaced by a sense of safety as they together navigate the cobblestone streets. They make their way up a sloping path to the outskirts of the district. Artie's eyes light up as familiar landmarks appear. His grip on the rescuer's shoulders tightens from impatience. The group finally reaches the grand stone cathedral and the boy excitedly points, exclaiming that they have arrived at their destination. As they approach the entrance, Alan freezes and cheekily looks up at the majestic building, wondering if this holy place might hold the same information about vampires that he is seeking. He has reached the destination, where a man in clerical robes is already rushing to meet them and immediately exclaims with joy, recognizing this man as the priest he was looking for. The priest, visibly relieved, pulls the boy into protective embraces and looks up to ask if it was indeed they who found him. He introduces himself as Dan, barely smiling gently and tiredly, and explains that he is the boy's guardian. His face shines with deep gratitude. His gaze warms behind his glasses, and finally the burden of anxiety lifts from his shoulders. He watches his artful rays with a wide-toothed smile as if the previous tears never existed. The boy warmly thanks his new friends, calls them by name now with a regained sense of security and belonging, and Alan and Charles look on with satisfied smiles. The priest, Dan, exhales with relief, squeezing the little boy's hand. He sincerely thanks the whole group and admits that when he learned the boy had gone into the crowd and got lost among people, his heart almost stopped. The child meets him with stubborn refusal and declares that he was not the one who got lost. On the contrary, everyone else moved away from him. Dan gently corrects the boy and asks him to apologize for the great worry he caused. Eventually, the child, albeit reluctantly, yields. Watching this exchange, the young traveler notes how skillfully the priest handles everything on the spot. He sees in him a person of reason and compassion, and a thought begins to form in him whether this is the very man to turn to in order to obtain the delicate information he seeks. He steps forward when the priest offers a reward for their help, but politely refuses any payment. instead saying he has a specific matter he wants to discuss with Dan alone. The priest agrees to help in any way he can and invites them to the sanctuary for a private conversation. Before leaving, the young man turns to his companion, Charles, and asks for her patience for a moment while he settles the matter. They enter the quiet space of the church, where the priest sits, ready to fully concentrate on what is before them. He gets confused when the young man finally asks his question, what does the priest know about the existence of vampires? Just saying that word cracks his composure. A genuine shock appears on his face as he processes the request. He recovers a little and insists on clarification. The question concerns vampires of ancient legend or that recent, disturbing vampire incident. The young man answers grimly and makes it clear that he is interested in both. He admits, although the recent incident seems to have been resolved, the anxiety still lingers. Across the table, Alan listens attentively as the priest begins to talk about the shadows tormenting the city. Then the priest politely changes the subject and asks if his guest is a knight. Alan modestly confirms, yes, at least for now. This revelation plunges the man in the cassock into thoughtful silence. He lowers his gaze to his gloved hands and tightens them, restraining a subtle nervous tension. Alan watches him, feeling the pressure of the information the priest is hiding. Seeing the chance, the young traveler asks if the priest would agree to share the knowledge he gained during his religious studies about ancient legends. He begins to explain that the term vampire means a legendary race of demons supposedly bred by vampire bats. These creatures have extraordinary strength, so folklore says. A single one can lay waste to an entire city in one night. Gloomily continuing his lecture, he notes, their power is fueled by human blood. About a vampire who was consumed in a banquet of 10 victims, they say he has enough might to challenge several first-class heroes at once. Then the priest introduces the concept of kina, a word that arouses the young man's curiosity. He explains, according to legend, vampires have the terrible ability to create such tutors. He clarifies, these kin are people to whom the vampire gave blood, so they received similar dark powers and a thirst to attack their own kind. While he speaks, his hands remain tightly clasped as if he is holding back a truth deeper than words. He accepts the young man's thanks with a modest nod, listens attentively to the traveler as he explains how much detailed knowledge was given, while his companion, calling him by his pseudonym, silently watches the scene. When the priest stands up to conclude the meeting and says he will answer any additional questions in the future, the young man's gaze falls on the cleric's gloved hands. He asks if the priest has an injury, as he has long been curious about those gloves. The man becomes flustered. He begins to justify the hidden marks with a trembling voice, saying they are old burns he got several years ago. He watches as the young man accepts the explanation, and for a moment doubt flashes in the traveler's eyes. The boy is simply asking the priest to take care of himself, and the cleric politely, though somewhat strainedly, confirms. While they walk away from the church, he apologizes to his companion for holding her for so long. She brushes off his concern with a gentle smile, reminding him she was the one who invited him first, so he has nothing to worry about. While they walk, his thoughts are still tied to the conversation, to that eerie feeling he had when he previously encountered the demon. When his friend asks if he is still chewing over the topic of vampires, he quietly nods, confirming his suspicion. It is the realization that the monster he defeated could have been a person turned into a kina that weighs on him like a stone. If so, the real vampire is still prowling somewhere within the city walls, right in plain sight, hidden from view. While he is lost in thought, she calls him again, sharply pulling him out of deep immersion. He apologizingly, then does he realize how late it is. She insists that he come inside and says that darkness is already falling on the street. She shines with confidence when he asks if she is sure about it and insists. Protecting others is part of a guardian's duty. Her cheerful determination gives him a brief respite from the dark theories clouding his mental maze. She looks at him with a soft, lingering gaze, and remembers how another day passed and she still did not find the words she desperately needed to say. When she walks away from the church, the burden of her silence grows and she begins to wonder if the right moment will ever come to open her heart. Meanwhile, Father Dan stands in the shade. His breath falters as he looks at the dark, round burn mark that is already beginning to show through the fresh bandages. He called the next in line. The quill hovered over the tally book. A long line stretched into the distance, evidence of growing unrest and how many people are rushing into the city. He wipes sweat from his forehead and ponders the sudden surge of work. The southern gate has become a bottleneck. Everything is worsened by the lack of guards as soon as more men are sent to deal with the wave of demonic incidents that is growing. While he considers these demonic manifestations he sees, they coincide with the story he remembers from the game, but the feeling does not leave him. Something is broken at the very foundation. And the recent incident with the vampire especially, like a bug in an already established timeline. This realization pushes him into an anxious thought. Could his own presence and interference be changing the fate of the world so that it distorts and deviates from the intended past? A sharp voice suddenly cuts through his thoughts, instantly pulling him out of his own reflections. He sharply looks around, frightened by the unexpected interference from behind. He is immediately met by a senior soldier named Crow, demanding to know why he is daydreaming at work. He quickly apologizes to the superiors and tries to regain professional self-control despite the reprimand. He admits that the man undoubtedly has good features and the sharp, confident gaze of a seasoned warrior. But he knows, appearances can be deceiving. He watches as the impeccable professional appearance of the senior soldier immediately cracks, replaced by a coquettish smile when he begins questioning a young girl named Yuria. Inside, he exhales deeply. Although Crow's face is top-level, his character is clearly disappointing. He watches as the superior Crow leans closer to the young traveler named Yuria. Crow's tone is even and smooth. He praises her name and asks what she is doing in the capital. Yuria shyly explains she has a new job at a local flower shop. He is annoyed by the blatant flirting on duty, but Crow simply brushes off the silent judgment with a light wave and continues comparing the girl's beauty to the flowers she will be selling. Finally, he cuts and tugs the senior soldier by the sleeve and demands focus on the ever-lengthening line of travelers. But Crow sharply rebukes him, telling the rookie to keep his thoughts to himself. And the clerk calmly waits nearby with the documents. Boiling with anger, he cannot help but feel. Although he is also a background figure, Crow's arrogance is unbearable. He is drawn back to those professional days when he worked with Modi-senpai until a familiar, authoritative voice echoes through the gates. The sound cuts off sharply as he turns and sees Captain Elda walking snowfar ahead opposite approaching. Her face is serious, and she announces that she is looking for a specific person. Before he can respond, Crow already bows and showers the captain with excessive compliments, but she easily cuts through his flattery and clearly states, her business is with the enemy overseer named Silva. Hearing the sudden call, Crokin only looks at Eldu in surprise and informs the young guard squad that she has a task for him immediately. She grabs him by the collar and drags him to the Night Order headquarters. Having just arrived in the commander's office, she wastes no time. Despite the recent containment of the vampire crisis, the city is hit by a new wave of kidnappings. Women have become the victims. The only clue is a mysterious figure in black robes. She listens while he contemplates the mysterious figure in the black robia memory that haunts his thoughts. Through this connection, he suggests to her the idea. The recent kidnappings are related to the incident with the vampire. She freezes, questions his logic. After all, he supposedly eliminated the threat. He lowers his gaze to his own hand and admits, the victory turned out to be hollow, without the resistance he expected from such a creature. He continues the explanation and says that he heard, vampires can create trells. It is very likely that the creature he knocked down was only a subordinate, not the real master. When the weight of his words reaches her, she grasps the chilling subtext. The real vampire is still at large. He is overwhelmed by guild laments that if only he had been more attentive, these new disappearances might not have happened. Eldo explains the full seriousness of the vampire threat to Alan and asks for his help with the investigation. He agrees, immediately surprising her with his instant composure and no hesitation. She modestly brushed off her surprise and said that he absolutely could not throw this porridge onto others when he was able to help. The young man caught the heavy bundle thrown by his captain. The latter was clearly impressed by his determination and ordered to take him as a leader. He listens while she reads out the list of victims, and it becomes clear that another injured person is leaving the local clinic and may have information that will overturn the case and fully reveal it. She calls Lancewell Clinic on the edge of the city, and he freezes solid, because this name triggers in him a memory from a world he once knew as a game. He recalls the local Dr. Lancewell Fockart, a key figure, a useful ally who trades in restorative items cheaply, but at the same time one of those who is extremely difficult and troublesome to deal with. Shaking off hesitation, he confirms that he is investigating the clinic and immediately receives a confident smile and a word of support from his captain. Arriving at the familiar building, he winked at the sharp smell of medicine and recalled his last visit when he brought here those who survived, noting, the stench is just as disgusting as before. He steps over the threshold of the clinic and calls for Dr. Lancewell, a barely noticeable weight in his voice, as he surveys the room filled with medications. Coming out from behind, the doctor meets him with a casual, almost indifferent tone, asking if he is an injured patient or just another visitor, until her gaze suddenly clears with sudden recognition. She recognizes him as the guard who carried the woman attacked by a demon. Memory is a pure trick. It confuses him, considering they have only crossed paths once. With a barely predatory, confident smile, she explains that it is impossible to remember him all because of his connection with that monster from the special big heroes. No matter how much he flinches at the sharp description of his companion, the doctor waves her hand, dismisses his objections, and demands he state his name. As soon as he introduced himself as Silva, she caught him completely off guard with a dull, dispassionate command. Take off your clothes right now, immediately. Despite his confusion and Charlotte's presence, the doctor does not relent, insisting that if he has business with her, he must first undress for an examination. Reluctantly complying, he sits shirtless while she begins a strange check driven by a quirky conviction that a person's true nature and past are engraved on their bare skin. She leans in very close, her eyes indifferently and scrutinizingly scanning his physique, and says that he is one of those who look even thinner when fully dressed. He can only utter a strained, hesitant yes, and the awkwardness of the situation is evident in the drops of sweat on his skin. Having finished the examination, the doctor casually tells him that it's enough so he can get dressed. He almost fumbles the shirt back onto his shoulders and hurriedly pulls it on, then, mixing confusion with distrust, asks what she could have possibly seen from this strange and brief examination. Alan stands before Lancewell's clinical gaze. She notes, he is merely a soldier, not a knight, yet the composition of his body astonishes her to the depths of her soul. He grimaces and shifts uncomfortably under her scrutinizing inspection, confirming his rank, while her eyes linger long with scientific curiosity almost predatory. She leans closer, and her tone becomes a creepy hint as if to dissect him to uncover all the secrets. The blood drains from his face. He shudders, turning away in genuine horror, but she brushes off the threat as a joke. Although the dark halo behind her reveals a mind constantly fueled by such morbid possibilities, he takes himself in hand again and explains the purpose of the visit. He came to investigate those who survived the recent incident with vampires. She listens attentively, and his words about needing more information than officially reported bring back her cold clinical detachment. He continues the explanation and adds, although there are official reports in the Night Order, the threat of those who still remain vampires still looms. He is convinced that only a direct word to those who survived this guarantees the safety of the city and fears that the danger is not over yet. She absorbs his words with a sharp, boldly attentive look before ordering him to wait. She abruptly turns toward the back room. Her cold, clinical manner disappears. The goal remains as she prepares to show exactly the person he is looking for. She turns and quietly leads the girl named Yuria into the light, explaining that the child has endured a terrible ordeal and is still trembling badly. She introduces him as a just warrior who faithfully protects the innocent and tries to build a bridge between the fear of the broken girl and the young man. He kneels down to meet the girl's. Aishi's voice sounds sincere and unyielding. He promises her he will find and hunt down the monsters that brought her pain and will do everything to keep everyone safe. Convinced by his determination, she finds the strength to nod and agrees to help him on this journey. While they prepare to speak further, his gaze falls on her hands and notices something unusual. He quietly asks what happened to them, his concern darkening as he realizes the scars from that event may not be only emotional. She shows a strange round mark on the back of her palm. Its shape is amazingly perfect. Alan examines it closely, noticing the bruise's insensitivity. When he asks how many there are, she admits she doesn't remember exactly, only that it was already in place when the bad man came for her. He falls silent for a moment, looks at the mark, and gently holds her hand. His thoughts race as he just realized what such a brand means. After a short pause, he thanks her for her courage and cooperation, throwing a small smile to somehow ease her obvious despair. Turning his attention to the doctor, he shares an increasing suspicion that this is a mark left by a vampire, a theory he developed while observing the girl's condition. They continue the discussion, and the doctor admits there is no concrete evidence yet, but the assumption that it will serve as a beacon for future attacks sounds logical and terrifying. He is overwhelmed by a flash of hope. Believing that this discovery is the very breakthrough needed to solve the mystery, he sincerely thanks the doctor for the help. She responds with a weak, inscrutable smile, and her eyes barely narrow as she says it is truly good that they found the leash. She leans forward with a predatory smile and casually demands a staggering 60,000 gold as a fee for cooperation. The sheer absurdity of the amount makes the boy tremble, and unable to recover, his face shows only pure shock. Noticing his suffering, she adds a cold alternative. If he cannot pay, he should simply allow her to dissect his body for research if he dies prematurely. It is a joke said with such clinical detachment that it shakes him. He is forced to reconsider the price of her help. Somewhere further away, the soft silence of the city square is broken by the arrival of the local priest. He approaches the young girl as she tends to bright flowers and quietly compliments her, saying how beautiful they are. She flinches at his appearance, She raises her gaze, and her surprise immediately turns into a respectful greeting to the man with the claw. Continuing to work among the petals, she suddenly feels a sharp prick, and a sudden cry of pain escapes her lips. Puzzled and embarrassed by this trifle, she quickly apologizes, and her attention momentarily slips from her work. He extends his hand, and his gaze immediately catches on the strange mark on her arm. When he asks, she waves it off lightly and explains. The bruise appeared only yesterday and probably due to her own clumsiness. His face changes, not a trace remains of the warm greeting, only a heavy, gloomy focus remains. He warns her that this is not just a bruise but a demonic curse that cannot be ignored. If left untreated, he says, it will bring disaster upon her. Frightened by the discovery, she can only freeze in shock while he insists they must immediately go to the church. He promises to exorcise the curse before it takes root, and with a desperate plea for help, she follows him. As they leave, a restrained, inscrutable expression briefly crosses his face, and his true intentions remain hidden in the shadows. In the quiet office, the captain announces grim news. Another young woman was kidnapped last night. Alan stands before her desk, absorbing the weight of the report as the full seriousness of what happened settles in the room. She slides the document across the table, explaining that it contains the victim's data. He takes the paper and reviews the information, his eyes widening suddenly. He sharply recognizes the face looking back at him. All awareness strikes him like a physical sharp pain. The name and face belong to Yuria, an innocent girl he met quite recently. He clearly remembers her shy smile and how she introduced herself, so the news of her disappearance suddenly becomes too personal. Clenching his teeth, he feels a drop of sweat roll down his face, and he curses how everything turned out in time. Could it be that the girl he met just yesterday has already fallen into this darkness, and anger rises within him? Seeing his despair, the captain places a hand on his shoulder, advising not to bear this burden alone and promises full support from Night Order. In response, he carves a barely noticeable grateful smile, but anxiety is still etched in the features of his face. After a minute of heavy silence, he raises his gaze and admits to Eldie. He has already drawn up a plan based on one accurate guess. She leans closer, curious about what exactly he has uncovered and how he intends to act next. He points to a specific detail in the report, a mark on the victim's hand, and asks why a child could have survived in such a case. His mind races, piecing together the puzzles that others might have missed during the initial investigation. With a new spark of determination in his eyes, he declares that he will use this information to set a trap for the kidnapper. He no longer just reacts, takes the initiative to bring the guilty to justice. He is already somewhere else preparing his trap, leaving the church standing in quiet watch under the cold glow of the full moon. In the quiet building, a mysterious figure in a hood glides past, sleeping artillery. In its presence, drags a dark shadow down the corridor. Father Dan quickly notices her. During his night rounds, he stops, feeling that a stranger is standing near the entrance. She approaches him with a trembling voice, apologizes for the late hour, and hides her face. Then she shows him a strange mark on her hand, and the priest, adjusting his glasses, anxiously examines the spot, noticing an unusual darkening. They ask her when exactly this mark first appeared, and she answers that it manifested shortly after she arrived at the royal capital, confessing her confusion and fear. She shudders from shock when he recognizes the mark as a demon's curse. His face hardens, and explaining the dark nature of this affliction, he further emphasizes the seriousness of what is happening. She offered the cleansing for free, so, stunned, she began fervently praying for her own salvation, while the priest assured her he would do everything in his power to help. She silently followed him as he led her to a deeper, more private room in the church, her head bowed under the weight of her hood. Inside, he gestured for her to sit and handed her a cup of black tea, so she could relax before they began the consultation. With trembling hands, she took the cup, raised it to her lips, and slowly, deliberately took a sip under his watchful gaze. She noticed that the tea tasted incredible, and he responded that the aroma was chosen precisely for its ability to calm a troubled mind. With a quiet smile, he adjusted his glasses and announced that it was time to begin the process. As soon as she tried to respond, suddenly a wave of dizziness overwhelmed her, and she swayed in the chair. He noticed her anxiety and asked if something was wrong, but she could only utter a confused, fragmented thought as the world began to blur. Before she could say another word, her strength suddenly vanished, and she helplessly collapsed forward onto the floor into a deep, unnatural sleep, and he looked down, aloud, wondering if she had finally drifted away. He drags the lame woman through the door opening and down the stairs, delving into the very building. He reaches the hidden storage cell filled with barrels, sets it on the floor, and turns the heavy mechanical valve himself. Then he looms over her while she lies defenseless in her forced sleep, stretching a rope between his hands. Den leans over the wrapped figure, his face showing deep anxiety for the victim. Suddenly, the woman's eyes snap open sharply. In her gaze is a sharp predatory audacity, so inappropriate it throws him off balance. From this sudden movement, he shudders in shock as the figure throws off the cloak and reveals the unmistakable figure of Kaguya. She snorts disdainfully and mocks his audacity, because he actually thought he could ever bind someone of her caliber. He steps back, stumbling, his thoughts swirling in confusion. How is she still conscious? He was sure the sleeping potion he gave her would keep her unconscious for hours. She simply smiles and lifts the small pouch he used to hold the sedative. Slightly tilting her head, she playfully asks if this was the very item he hoped would secure his victory. With a wrist nod, she slams the container against the wall with a crashed liquid splashes uselessly. Then she taunts him, insisting the medicine was far too tasty, though it was clear she saw through his trick from the very start. The heroine steps forward, her aura pressing as she declares that bad people deserve appropriate punishment. For a moment, he tries to persuade her to listen, but she has no intention of granting him any mercy. Suddenly, a sharp, deadly force bursts from her and he is thrown through the air until he crashes into the ground with a dull thud. Dust settles, and she stands unshaken. Her power effortlessly shattered the priest's defense. He lies sprawled on the ground, gasping for air and clutching his chest, looking up in horror. Only then does it finally dawn on him, the true, genuinely terrifying nature of the woman before him. He helplessly watched as the situation completely reversed. Alan stepped forward and bound the woman who had just revealed her truly formidable form. Holding the ropes tightly, the young traveler declared he was taking her into custody despite the mocking smile still playing on her lips. He led her away, still trembling from the sheer audacity of her performance. He admitted, the skill to portray a fragile, helpless woman is truly frightening. But Kaguya looked not at all impressed by her catch, walked as if it were an ordinary stroll. She leaned closer and pretended to pout offendedly, insisting that deep inside her was the delicate heart of a maiden. Alan could only cast a tired, skeptical glance at her theatrics in response. Knowing her strength clearly, she continued to hide everything behind that innocent mask. She watched as he again shifted his gaze to the trembling priest who was trying to maintain composure. Sweat dripped down the man's face as he stumbled over his words, and in despair, asked what exactly made the traveler suspect him from the very beginning. He began to lay out his thoughts, recalling the gruesome details of recent attacks. And although a real vampire would have sucked every drop of blood from the victim, there remained a single witness, a young girl who was kept alive amid the slaughter. One detail that did not fit the profile of a mindless monster. He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to a low, accusatory tone as he suggested, the criminal might have spared the child due to a sudden fit of pity. He proposed the theory that the attacker had his own child or someone close, and that was what held him back at the last moment. He continued, explaining that this was not the only reason for his suspicion, but a critical detail that directly pointed to the one in whom humanity still flickered. The priest could only stare in response. His eyes widened in shock as the full weight of the accusation settled on him. He was left speechless when the final blow was dealt to the defenseend, when they discovered the almost complete absence of any physical traces of the criminal. This void of evidence itself became the signature of someone who knew exactly how to erase traces, leaving the man no chance to hide anything. He does not utter a word while Alan continues the relentless interrogation, noting the suspicious absence of witnesses in this series of recent incidents. Alan assumes the victims did not resist because they themselves walked toward death, led by the one they trusted unconditionally, like the priest himself, who holds the town's unwavering faith. The priest sinks even deeper into despair, bowing his head under the weight of the truth revealed without any embellishment. Alan notes, if a man of such standing spoke of a curse, the townspeople would blindly follow his word and would not ask whose hand leads them into darkness. Kaguya looks with a sly, predatory smile. At this moment, Alan unfolds the entire mechanism of deception. He explains, if someone suddenly discovers strange bruises on their body, anxiety covers them, and they become easy prey for the spiritual guide who promises salvation from an alleged curse supposedly cast upon them. Suddenly a hand reaches out and touches his face, a touch that brings a sharp flash of realization over it. His eyes widen in horror, sweat beads appear on his forehead, and he hoarsely exhales one trembling word. The foundation of his plan was based on a lie. Alan Sticka, with reproaches, confronts Dan in the shadow of the storage room. He points out, women with recognizable bruises were kept here, but they are no longer here. And now it becomes clear with terrifying certainty, they have already been swallowed by the monsters to whom they were supposed to be devoted. The tension between them is felt immediately, as soon as their gazes meet in the dim light. One is filled with righteous anger, the other with empty, fear-permeated resignation. Because of the gravity of the priest's betrayal, he briefly considers ending it all with his own blade right there. but he stops his hand, deciding that this man must be brought before the night order to answer according to proper law. Then he pulls out a small strip of paper, holds it so the priest can see, and warns he must keep absolute silence. He does not want innocent children in the church to hear and see their caretaker being led away in disgrace. Watch. Looking at the paper, the priest's figure sinks. His face crumples with heavy, silent sorrow as he reads the letter that admits his coercion and orders obedience without resistance. Later, behind the stone walls of the institution, the elder reports. Although the initial interrogations have ended, the priest stubbornly insists that he alone is guilty of the disappearances. She asks if he is truly certain of that man's innocence. He explains his theory. The priest was likely blackmailed by vampires and forced to assist with the kidnappings to protect the orphans under his care from a far worse fate. He supports this with a recollection of their very first meeting. How the priest reacted to the word vampire too physically and painfully, yet still provided key information about their kind, like a man desperately trying to do right, trapped in impossible circumstances. He stood alone in the darkness, feeling the weight of what had happened on his shoulders. Suddenly it dawned on him, the note was not just a message but a desperate cry for help, a quiet signal that could no longer be ignored. Returning to his companion, he listened as she pieced the puzzle together. She suggested that using a written note was a deliberate move, a way to convey information while he was continuously, vigilantly, and relentlessly watched by vampires who undoubtedly tracked his every move. They walked together through the silence of the night. She admitted she was shocked. She thought he was only observing from afar. He simply nodded, confirming that his involvement was much more direct than she initially thought. She continued her analysis and noted that the vampires could not strike even when she was in a vulnerable, disguised form. It seemed that if the enemy truly targeted its prey from the shadows, it would not make such a glaring mistake unless acting cautiously. With a spark in her eyes, she quickly leaned in and dubbed him a master detective for his insightful guesses. The young man could only respond with a guilty look, somewhat confused by the unexpected praise from this formidable woman. Their moment of relief was interrupted by the captain, looked clearly shaken. She reported the harsh reality. The vampire had already taken more than 10 victims, and his thirst for blood seemed unstoppable. The captain's face grew sterner as she explained. The creature's power increases exponentially with each life it takes. She warned that waiting was no longer an option. If the monster is not stopped immediately, the number of victims will only continue to rise. Hearing this, he felt the chill of a familiar premonition. It was not just a random tragedy, it was the catalyst for the first major event in the game's plot. And when the practical exams of Hero Academy loomed ahead, he realized the stakes were much higher than he had ever imagined. He hesitated between the grim possibility of a level 3 demon attack coinciding with the vampire threat, realizing the hero candidates were in mortal danger. Swiftly turning, he called his companion. He admits that there is a task only she can handle. This provokes in her an interesting, slightly amused reaction when she asks for details. She is left with thoughts alone, and just like everywhere else, under the light of the full moon, the young woman reaches the foot of the moon tower. She does not suspect that a gaze has fixed on her, while the dark-clad woman contemplates the bitter irony. She is being asked to help a potential rival for his affections. She asserts herself immediately right when the red-haired teenage intern recalls his advice to seek this powerful ally to become stronger. She is ordered to survive this inevitable procedure, while the powerful mentor promises to engrave the training into her very soul with terrible intensity. The forest of trials is silent under the giant sky covered with clouds, and a dense row of trees outlines the boundary of the upcoming trial. Standing before the gathered candidates, the high-ranking knight proclaims in a commanding voice that the knightly order expresses its respect to all candidates for hero, gathered at the time of the event. In the crowd, he adjusts his helmet. The weight of the moment settles on his shoulders. Understands, the practical combat exercise is about to begin. Next to her, a girl with pink hair walks even in solitude, while her peers, puzzled, cast confused glances at her as if to say, why is she alone and not in her usual company? Her former companion immediately dismisses her, coldly explaining to everyone that the girl no longer belongs to their group. He looks at her distant figure. The blonde student does not understand what might be going on in her head if she dared such a dangerous, monster-hunting approach without any support. Turning back to the young man, his red-haired friend asks with genuine anxiety whether they should really just leave her to face the trial alone. While he feels a heavy gaze fixed on him, the confident nobleman nearby watches, squinting. His thoughts are filled with contempt for the lowly gatekeeper amidst all this. From a distance, she watches Charles and decides, let them leave her alone for now, but her sudden departure from the group is deeply troubling. This decision grew from a deeper anxiety. He recalls how powerful she has become, perhaps even to the peak of strength of the entire student body. He weighs his own role in this. He personally asked Hadja to oversee her training. And now he understands the choice led to this tense, solitary growth. While he contemplates this, the proctor's voice cuts through the silence and speaks about the dangers of the Forest of Trials. The knight explains, the place teems with rank 3 and rank 4 monsters, so for the candidates this will be a serious test. The announcement darkens as the proctor reports. Level 1 demons have also been released into the forests. This news spreads a wave of anxiety among the gathered students, especially Lena and Margarita, who exchange worried glances as soon as they recall such dangerous enemies. Sensing the tension, the knight reassures them. The order will be nearby to provide protection. He orders them to signal for immediate rescue if they find themselves in mortal danger during the exercises. General warnings have already been given. Now the focus is on the specifics of the training. Professor Leap is called to reveal the operational details and rules of the practical combat exercise. She steps forward, holding a ritual stake, and explains that the training grounds are strictly defined. The Academy has established a magical barrier to contain the exercise and ensure the safety of those outside its bounds. Looking back through the dense green canopy, she points to the wall of light, a flickering sign that marks the boundary. She warns the students, stakes are driven along the border, and stepping over them and going into the unknown is strictly forbidden. She finishes the briefing. In a calm, even voice, she explains that their grades will depend entirely on the number of monsters and demons they manage to kill within the barrier. With a final stern warning, she urges each student to stay alert and be ready for the dangers ahead. Having finished the briefing, she officially announces the dawn for the practical exercise. As soon as this sounds, the tension eases. Students like Bouei rush forward, their steps thundering on the grass as they race to the tree-lined alley. The group quickly disappears into the dense foliage of the trial forest, leaving the clearing behind as they begin their H. In the midst of the first assault, a voice cuts through the air. Brajo calls to Charles and she stops. She turns sharply with slight annoyance, coldly asking what business he could have with her now. He catches up, and his face involuntarily softens, unusually restrained, as he says that getting lost in such a dangerous place alone is pure recklessness. Continuing his plea, he admits past faults, says he will improve, and finally asks if she could reconsider forming a party with him again. He goes even further, swearing to cherish her and protect her, this time even at the cost of his own life. But she simply looks away. Her face hardens as she declares that she is tired of living under someone's protection and will take care of herself from now on. Without saying another word, she orders him to stop following her, naming her own goals, and then disappears into the shadow of the trees. He remains alone, calling her name with desperate, futile hope that she will still stop. In despair, he chases after her, shouting her name and begging her to wait so they can talk. Charles, however, pays him no attention at all. Her face is focused and unyielding as she flees headlong deeper into the forest, thicket, her thoughts entirely on what lies ahead. Charles approaches Professor Labe and, asking questions, probes her actions. The closer he gets, the wider her eyes open in horror. On the back of her hand is a blackened dark round mark, the mark of a trell, unmistakable. Alan meets her incomprehension, asks what is happening, but her voice only trembles with betrayal as she accuses the instructor of becoming a servant of the vampires. She recalls Silva's warning. The training exercise was a target, and there may be a traitor inside the academy. She finally realizes the full seriousness of the situation. Leap is the very insider they were warned about. The professor remains silent. Her face is frozen in a shadow of remorse and submission as she looks at the accusations of the young woman. Her attention is suddenly torn away by the surrounding barrier beginning to crack and crumble under colossal external pressure. She desperately pleads, "Let her go," threatening to attack if they do not. But the professor only clenches his fist, muttering that any resistance is now futile. Emerging from the dark shadows behind her appears a massive, stocky demon. His gigantic figure almost engulfs the professor. He curls his lips in a malicious sneer, declaring that the woman has served her purpose and is now just a disposable puppet. With a cold flick of his wrist, the fiend throws her away like trash. Charles screams in horror as they throw out her teacher, and the demon looms over them. His presence reeks of pure malice. Despite the threat he poses, Bouei sees a chance to prove his worth and dismisses the creature with a wave, claiming it is just a low-level demon. He calculates, if he defeats it, he will surely win her heart. Smirking confidently, he begins channeling mana into a lightning-fast slash. He lunges forward sharply, the blade crackles with electric energy as he strikes the enormous enemy. Calmly confident, his soul resonance magic will handle and easily destroy a level 1 threat. He expected the strike to be decisive, but the voice that emerged from the settling dust was soaked with mocking laughter. The beast laughed at the very thought that a single blow could bring it down, warning the young nobleman not to confuse it with the pathetic, minor fodder he was used to dealing with. Breaking free from the haze with a predatory smile, the brute revealed the terrible truth. He was a level 3 threat, and his power far exceeded anything they had encountered. Clicking his joints ominously, he officially introduced himself as Garrett and proclaimed his dark goal to become the executioner of all who dared call themselves heroes. This news stunned the young nobleman. He could not believe what he heard. But before he could say anything, a new figure jumped into the fight. Charl abruptly stepped forward suddenly, as if from nowhere, and despite her companion's frightened shouts, stood face to face with the giant monster. Meeting the demon's gaze, she coldly and precisely laid out her deduction, accusing him of being merely a pawn in a conspiracy with vampires, the true hand behind Professor Lee's betrayal. She did not stop demanding to name exactly where those vampires who pulled the strings were now. In the demon's self-satisfied expression, something broke. It was replaced by genuine suspicion as he wondered how some miserable girl could know such a thing. But she met his gaze without any hesitation. She made it clear he would get no explanations from her. The massive demon jerd looms over Themusel's bulging, and it radiates a terrible tension. Beneath it, Charles and Alan stand still, but the pressure of the creature's magical aura almost suffocates them. Alan feels a power bursting from the monster level of mana he has never encountered before. He sees how the fool growls in frustration, demanding to know how they uncovered his presence, and declaring that his plans will not be passed on further. Garrett swears right here and now to cut them out. Feeling an immediate threat, Alan steps in front of Charleshi's sharp step throws her off balance, and she, exclaiming his name in surprise, freezes. The young warrior rushes forward, his mind racing, self-pressure and fierce determination. He scolds himself for the moment of hesitation when the demon appeared, yet anger still drives him. The equals and extras know nothing. The only thought, he must protect Charl at any cost. Through this reckless lunge, Garrett briefly smiles in surprise, mocking the boy as if he has the courage to get right in his face. Alan's blade strikes the demon's massive forearm, but the blow echoes as if hitting solid granite. He grits his teeth and with a cold jolt of anxiety realizes the skin of this creature is unnaturally tough. In response, the demon bursts out with mocking laughter and taunts Alan, saying those weak blows will never leave even a scratch on him. Garrett swings his heavy fist with all his might. Alan barely dodges, and in his mind, a frantic search for a vulnerable spot ensues. He knows that if he doesn't find a weakness soon, this fight will end before it truly begins. In a moment, he notices what looks like a breach and strikes with all his might, aiming at the demon's neck. He roars a cry of triumph, and in an unbearably brief moment, it seems to him that he has finally dealt the decisive blow. And the demon still does not falter. His voice flows with contempt as he asks if Alan still cannot grasp the reality of their situation. Garrett explains that his entire body is fortified with a dense layer of magical energy, so he is completely invulnerable. He snorts disdainfully at the very thought of a weak spot, and Alan freezes with wide-open eyes in shock as the demon's power presses on him. The demon's power presses on him. The force of their clash throws a cloud of dust and snow over the deserted field, and the roar of battle rolls through the cold air. He was thrown away while the demon Gerard stood amid the settling dust, declaring as if only the appetizer of their meeting had just ended. He licked his lips with a predatory hunger. The muscular man glared and announced, "Time for the main course." His gaze, full of malicious intent, slid toward the young woman nearby. She clung to the ground and silently admitted. From the very beginning, she had been expecting exactly this escalation. Harry loomed over her, flexing his massive, magically reinforced hands and mocking her, insisting that she was much scarier than the guy he had just fought and promising to grind her small body to nothing. Despite his threats, she stood up and challenged him, poking with hands that were already beginning to burn with power. With a sharp command, she summoned legendary might, ordering Fenrir Wolf to manifest. This sudden attack by a level 3 demon during ordinary training will not be forgotten. The pages of history began to turn, and this desperate clash became the defining first battle of the heroine Charlotte All. She did not retreat. Her voice rang authoritatively as she commanded Fenrir Wolf to appear and show its true form. When a large white wolf materialized beside her, a gigantic demon loomed in the distance, watching the pair with predatory interest. You watched the spectacle with a crooked smile and laughed at how she managed to tame such a spirit. With a sharp burst of speed, the giant dashed forward, but the wolf was faster, easily and effortlessly weaving between heavy, clumsy blows. She sat astride her companion and mocked his slowness, saying that slow movements could not compare to how agilely the wolf moved. The demon only snorted in response. Fleeing does not mean winning. She immediately dismissed his mockery, explaining that she had no intention of simply running away while preparing for their next move. The wolf lunged with its jaws at the demon's throat, but he just laughed, brushing off the attack, calling it weak and futile against his armor. Watching the clash, she admitted, the wolf's power alone might indeed be unable to defeat him. He stood as if rooted to the spot, full of arrogance, declaring that no stray dog had a chance to defeat him. He shuddered in shock when suddenly a gigantic dark-feathered creature materialized before him. Buran thundered, and his eyes widened at the unexpected appearance of a second spirit. Seeing his confusion, she squinted and recalled her previous confession. She could only manifest one spirit at a time. She had finally overcome this limitation. She stands unwavering between the white wolf and the newly summoned three-legged raven. She loudly proclaims the activation of her dual manifestation. Two spirits stand on both sides. Their presence radiates power. She remembers his arrogant statement that he has no weaknesses even when the demon casually scratches his head, as if he is simply bored with the show. But she explains, the raven, which she calls Yukyuin, has a special gift. It will show the way to the hidden vulnerability with its guiding fire. Suddenly, a small trembling spark flares against the massive chest of the demon. He looked down at the tiny flame and snorted contemptuously, barely feeling the impact of the stretch. She explains, the attack is inevitable, the ability safe hit, which marks the target regardless of its defense. The demon does not intend to react. Its gigantic figure looms over the battlefield. He brushed off the minor injuries, boasting that such shards would never bring him down. Undeterred, she prepared for the next attack, vowing to continue the barrage until his monstrous figure finally crumbled. She watches as the merciless assault continues. The three-legged crows dive and hit unerringly, pressing right on target. The massive demon groans hoarsely in pain. His movements become convulsive as he tries to brush away the invisible pressure. He roars in fury, calling the attacks annoying and petty, but the dark mark on his chest begins to bleed, proving that the guiding fire has indeed found its aim. The giant demon Garrett lunges forward, muscles bulging, and he roars the name of his technique. Charles drums his fist and yells at Lil to move. The two of them barely manage to dodge the devastating force of the strike. She clings tightly to the wolf's back, eyes wide with horror as she realizes a single powerful punch was enough to split the ground. If that blow had landed directly on them, it would have simply wiped them out. Across the clearing, the grim Mitz, who wants to prolong the fight, is stalling time, but he knows not a second more can be wasted. He clenches his fists. Dark determination settles on his facial features as he decides to end this fight with his next strike, so that the girl and her beast have no chance to escape. He is suddenly interrupted by the ethereal fire conductor. The flash stops all over his body, and white flames flicker, licking the skin. Charles freezes in disbelief. The demon does not even try to defend himself from the mysterious flame, as if he has already completely resigned to its touch. She reaches out her hand to stroke Lil's head, and a softness appears in her gaze, a calm pensiveness amid the fading chaos on the battlefield. She whispers to her companion, reminding him of their shared promise to fight to the very end and never turn away from the enemy. Her thoughts return to a quieter moment. During training exercises, she anxiously questioned her companion about rumors of a demonic invasion. She listens while Alan admits, although it is only a supposition, he feels a heavy responsibility to track down the vampire threat. But he immediately makes it clear that his priority is also to protect her. She firmly rejects the idea of being somewhere nearby as a standard, insists that she is fine, and intends to fight side by side with him. She lowers her gaze to the memory, strengthens her resolve, and understands. She cannot simply rely on others to protect her. She needs to find the strength to stand on her own. She decides to become a hero because it is everyone's duty to fight the demon race and protect the innocent from cruelty. Once he told her with a gentle smile that she would definitely manage, and now these words have become the foundation of her unbreakable strength. She understands, if the monster is going to so openly leave itself unprotected, then this is the perfect moment to strike back. She calls her companion Yakun, ordering the mystical bird to seize the moment and immediately attack that brute. The massive demon is confused when the three-legged raven crashes headlong from above at incredible speed. In an instant, he is blinded. Sharp claws tear his sight, and he becomes helpless. She stands over the fallen giant victoriously. She breathes heavily, but her gaze is fixed, firm and unchanging until the battle finally ends. She demands that he reveal everything he knows about vampires and makes it clear. His defeat is final, and time has run out. The stupid demon, guard, snorts as he pulls out a small vial and contemplates the forbidden power of vampire blood. Cheryl watches, her breath catches as she realizes the sacrifices he is willing to make to achieve victory. He drains the vial in one gulp. The effect ignites instantly. His veins bulge, and the magical aura bursts outward with an explosion, a suffocating pressure that makes Charles's heart beat faster with anxiety. Because of this unnatural sharp wave, his next strike crashes down like a falling mountain. A miss catastrophic, the ground cracks and Charles is thrown back through a cloud of crushed stone. While chaos covers, The white wolf and the mystical raven remain on the sidelines' vigilant eyes, watch every movement through the thick mirage fog of the battlefield. Charles presses to the ground, the air leaves her lungs with the unbearable force of the explosion. She looks through the settling dust and feverishly searches for a way out of this desperate trap. A giant demon looms over her, its silhouette a dark omen against the sky. It looks down with a predatory smile, savoring the moment when its rival is finally brought down. He begins to boast, admitting that her skills were impressive for a human, but ultimately powerless against the strength he now holds. His voice rumbles with cruel satisfaction as he prepares to deliver the final devastating blow. Instead of trembling, she catches his gaze with sudden, chilling composure. A new light flashes in her eyes, as if even in this hopeless moment she has glimpsed a path he could never have imagined. She raises her gaze, and her voice sounds steady as she declares, "Even if she is missed this time, she will prove her worth and break free as the victor." In response to her unbreakable resolve, a low, threatening hum begins to tremble in the air, causing the huge demon to falter and, confused, look around for the source of this disturbance. In a moment, the sky seems to crack. An invisible barrier around the area shatters into 1,000 shining fragments, which fall over the forest canopy like crystalline dust. He freezes and looks up, unable to believe his eyes as the magical dome collapses. The protection he relied on is gone. Meanwhile, overhead, a small black bird circles, and the girl who was just defeated acknowledges her frustration from the ground she had to yield to the newcomer. She steps through the remnants of the broken barrier, her predatory smile growing as she glances at the demon, and thinking aloud, recalls the sturdy toy her apprentice gave her so she could play with it. Massive demon Garrett narrows his eyes as soon as he recognizes her. He understands. This is the very one they talked about, a special great hero. He recalls the warning that she is a natural enemy of his kind, a threat to the capital. Yet, clutching a small object in his hand, he still remains arrogant, boasting that he will smash her with his own 2 fists, no matter what reputation she has. The rough one roars with laughter and declares that he doesn't care how many little girls stand before him, he intends to kill them both. And the hero just looks on, with a quiet, almost pitiful expression, and says how scary it is when you don't understand your own worthlessness. As if playing, she makes a light gesture and strikes. The blow flashes instantly and knocks down with force. The monstrous demon is thrown back, he croaks in pain, and the ground beneath him cracks and crumbles. Carefully turning with a calm smile, she orders her companion to rest and says she will go play a little more. The girl can only freeze and watch silently, her words stuck in her throat, and, without saying another word, the heroine takes off into the air again. Her figure is a dark streak against the sky as she catches up to and pursues the remaining enemies. She freezes, watching the figure that is moving away. The adventurer remains in complete stupor. It is hard for her to gather her thoughts and comprehend how a demon of such terrible power could be destroyed so easily and without any effort. He does not retreat, a fierce cough pierces him. He contorts his huge body as blood sprays onto the ground. The stubborn demon Cyrodont Garud clings to the thought, unable to grasp the invisible force that just struck him. His mind races, trying to understand how an ordinary human so easily bypassed his defense, especially after he had just powered up. Before he could recover, a pair of delicate boots lightly lands on the broken ground. Their sound is almost a whisper against the background of his heavy, ragged breathing. She stands on his own clenched fist, light as a feather and boldly arrogant. Kaguya looks down at the giant and smiles, revealing cruel relief. At least he was strong enough to survive her first attack. And he tears his gaze upward, filled with deadly, outraged intent. She mocks his clumsy attempts to hit her. She rejects his crude strength, unrefined and unappealing. And she notes, she finds such clumsy men disgusting. When the demon demands to know if she uses magic to hover before him, she only quietly snorts and explains, she is not flying at all. She is simply falling in the other direction. She begins to explain the nature of her terrible gift, manipulation of gravity itself. By controlling the magnitude and vector of the force acting on her, she can hover in the air as easily as a leaf in the wind, until the demon looks up with confused surprise and increasingly realizes the boundless chasm between their powers. Glancing at his trembling, disappointed expression, she asks what he intends to do next, when his strongest weapon, physical strength, has completely lost its meaning. Her voice is even almost indifferent as she points out, his proud fist in such a state will never reach her. Her mockery drives him mad, and he unleashes a desperate, gigantic blow, tearing an avalanche of earth and force that flies straight at the one hovering in the air, in his last attempt to crush her. With a light wave of her hand, she redirects the incoming destruction as if it were a minor annoyance. She explains, her control extends to everything that enters her field, so his attempts are futile, the debris is swept aside, and the demon widens his eyes and gasps in pure shock. She smiles down at the freak, a predatory, eerie delight flashing in her eyes as she contemplates how to return the gift he so kindly gave her. Beneath her, the giant demon can only stare in confusion, his mind breaks trying to grasp the sudden change in the air. With just a slight wrist movement, it seems as if the earth itself obeys her whim. She uproots a colossal tree and swings it into the sky directly toward the opponent. Aloud, with a chilling sweetness, she wonders if such a gesture will be enough to satisfy him. The demon lets out a hoarse roar of agony as the huge trunk crashes into the ground with a dull thud, pinning him under the crushing weight of wood and stone. A cloud of dust rises from the impact, hiding the scale of the destruction. Despite the devastating blow, he manages to lift himself, his face distorted by a mask of pure, merciless, furious rage. He is being treated like a mere toy. She only snorts at his endurance. His outrage amuses her and reminds him that he was the one who started this game first. Cold sweat breaks out on his forehead as he finally understands. This woman fights him not just for the sake of it. She treats the battle with the demon race as entertainment. A trembling horror seizes him. If he does not find a way out, he will surely be stabbed. Noticing his growing fear, she sighs quietly, a hint of disappointment in her voice, acknowledging that the novelty of their encounter is already beginning to fade. He falls back to the ground, his breathing breaking into ragged, convulsive gasps. The feeling of her presence suddenly becomes heavy, like a real burden. Looking at his pitiful state, she decides, it is time to end their little game once and for all. Her face darkens as she calls the name of her ultimate technique, gravity field moonlight domain. Above the trembling demon, a sphere of concentrated gravitational force begins to form. It flashes with a grim glow that promises only total destruction. He can only watch, frozen with fear, as the orb expands and engulfs the very sky. An invisible force instantly presses him into the ground as soon as it takes control of the lunar domain field. Kaguya calmly explains, in this space, gravity obeys her every wish, and she has already increased the pressure on his body tenfold. Due to his crushing weight, he is pressed so deeply into the ground that his bones crack under the strain. Kaguya stands on the broken body from above and looks down coldly and indifferently, disdainfully throwing him off like a worthless disposable toy. Despite the agony, the monster still spits out a bold warning through the blood flooding his mouth. He tells her not to celebrate yet, insisting that even if he falls, the vampire's grand plan is already in full swing. He watches as she only smiles at his desperate bravado and asks if these will be his last words before she finishes him off. With a mocking tilt of her head, she thanks him for the polite notice about his allies' plans. She is interrupted by Charles bursting onto the clearing, stumbling, shocked, her eyes widen as she sees the special great hero. The girl calls out the name Hagya, her voice trembling, mixed with awe and fear. Moment by moment, the young woman, without taking her eyes off the place behind the hero, freezes in horror. The demon is utterly shattered and the scale of destruction is incomprehensible. Kaguya simply turns away, stating that she is no longer interested in a toy that has been broken. Seized by a sudden, desperate need for power, she asked Kaguya what it takes to reach such heights of might. She wonders aloud how she could ever hope to become like the woman standing before her. When the heroine closes her eyes, she hears only a disdainful, confident smile in response. Kaguya tells the girl directly, catching up to her is an impossible dream, a feat never destined to happen. She lets out a quiet, contemptuous laugh beside the younger girl's face. The two stand among the neglected, snow-covered peaks. The tension from their previous conversation still hangs in the cold air. She puffs her cheeks in silent lip pursing, and her irritation is visible as she glances back at this special great hero. Seeing such a reaction, the heroine softens her tone a bit. She says that reaching her level is impossible, but over time the girl might at least get close enough to be within sight. She begins listing the girl's impressive set of talents, from exceptional agility to sharp senses and raw, untamed attack power. Nearby, a white she-wolf and a three-legged raven stand, and the hero points out, the girl is effectively carrying the weight of the entire squad and needs to hold herself more confidently. The young adventuress briefly lowers her gaze, swallowing the rare praise, then raises her eyes and stubbornly decides to continue. She turns directly to her mentor, pleading, do not stop, keep leading and teaching. But the heroine simply turns her back and dryly says she has nothing more to give. She brushes off her own power as a coincidence, adjusts the skill to adapt to moon magic, and the girl freezes in shock. She continues to explain as she walks away, clarifying that the girls from Nate Magic and the spirit art she applies are essentially different. Looking over her shoulder, she reminds her pupil, the recent training touched only the absolute basics. The girl stands still, physically and emotionally exhausted. The weight of this discovery presses on her. She leans closer to the younger woman, a playful yet confident smile on her lips, hinting that if the girl truly wants to become stronger, she should rely on her man. The proposal throws the girl off balance, and she responds quietly and uncertainly, saying he is not her man yet. Turning away with a graceful flick of her cloak, the heroine decides it's time to go see how everything unfolds. She muses aloud. She doesn't want to miss the spectacle of her beloved's bravery. She speaks lightly and with a tease. Striding with a sweeping step, she glances over her shoulder. With a simple question, she invites her companion to join the walk. The young adventuress catches his gaze and a firm core appears in her determination. Wasting no time, she confirms her intention and clenching her face tighter shows she will not retreat. Together, they make their way through the dense thinning of the forest. Walking, the older woman stops, senses something in the air. She notices that ahead, further on, two powerful magical auras are distinctly pulling. Deep in the heart of the Forest of Trials, the air becomes heavy. A rough, impatient voice echoes among the trees, grumbling that wasting time on these foolish things is pointless. A giant clawed hand grips the hilt of the torn sword even tighter, and the dark marks on the skin pulse with ominous energy. The owner of the voice growls about his own urgency and proclaims his sole bloody mission. He must find and cut out the heroes from. With a contemptuous farewell gesture, the scoundrel turns away and begins to slowly tap to the side. Heavy footsteps fade into the darkness of the forest, and the air remains filled with a sense of inevitable cruelty approaching in his wake. He crept through the forest like a shadow, leaving a trail of slaughter behind him. Hunched at the foot of a giant tree, the lonely soldier sat motionless, his blood now flowing down the bark and flooding the snow. The monster looked at what it had done and disdainfully brushed off the fallen as if from a nameless obstacle.